She stared at her reflection in the co-working space's bathroom mirror, carefully reapplying her signature eyeliner, while droplets of sweat threatened to ruin her perfectly crafted professional image. At 32, she had mastered the art of looking composed, even when her world was quietly falling apart. "Just get through this last Instagram live, then you can cry in the shower," she whispered to herself, adjusting the golden ankh necklace that had been her grandmother's final gift. The ancient Egyptian symbol of life now felt more like a weight, reminding her of all the expectations she carried as the first Wilson to leave academia for the corporate world. Her phone buzzed. Another bank notification. Nyota took a deep breath, her box braids swaying as she shook her head at the screen. The rent was due tomorrow, her mother's medical bills were piling up, and her small communication consulting business was still 3 clients short of breaking even this month. But her 2,500 Instagram followers were waiting. Voz E. Poder NW never missed a Thursday live session, even if only 30 people showed up to learn about public speaking techniques. She straightened her burgundy blazer, the one with African wax print details that made her feel both professional and true to her heritage, and walked back to her tiny office. The live session started like any other. "Remember, your voice matters," she said into her phone camera, positioned carefully to hide the water stain spreading across her office ceiling. "Today, we're talking about body language in high-pressure situations." That's when he stumbled in. Later, Nyota would remember every detail of that moment, the way his Armani suit couldn't hide the trembling of his hands, how his blue-gray eyes couldn't quite meet hers, the slight gray at his temples that made him look distinguished, yet somehow vulnerable. But most of all, she'd remember thinking that no one who wore a Patek Philippe watch, worth more than her annual income, should look that terrified. I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My communication coach just quit, and I have the most important presentation of my career tomorrow morning, and your office was the only light still on in the building, and—" He stopped, running his fingers through his carefully styled dark hair, destroying what was probably an expensive haircut. Nyota found herself doing what she always did when faced with someone in crisis. She switched into what her best friend Sage called her professional voice whisperer mode. "Everyone, I'm sorry, but we'll have to cut tonight's session short," she said to her phone, maintaining her calm smile. "Remember, your homework is to practice power poses in front of your mirror. Tag me in your attempts." She ended the live session and turned to the man who was now neurotically adjusting his watch. "I'm Nyota Wilson," she said, extending her hand, "and you look like you could use a cup of tea." "Jacob?" he replied, his handshake firmer than she expected. "Jacob Alexander Blackwood III, and what I need is a miracle." The ceiling fan whirred uselessly above them, pushing around hot air in the cramped office. Jacob's eyes darted to the door twice in the span of 10 seconds, a classic sign of social anxiety that Nyota had learned to recognize in her years of coaching. "Tell me about this presentation," she said, pulling out her emergency stash of chamomile tea, the fancy kind she saved for potential clients, not the generic brand she kept for herself. He checked his watch again, rotating it exactly 3 times. "It's for the board tomorrow. Our sustainable energy project could provide affordable power to thousands of low-income families, but if I don't convince them—" His voice trailed off. Nyota noticed the slight tremor in his left hand, the way his breathing hitched when he mentioned the board. Behind his perfect CEO facade, this man was terrified, and somehow that made him more real than any potential client she'd ever had. "How many hours do we have?" she asked, already pulling out her notebook, the one with the coffee stain on the cover that she kept meaning to replace. Jacob checked his watch again. 14 hours and 23 minutes. Nyota thought about her overdue rent, about the instant ramen waiting in her kitchen cabinet, about the fact that she had already used up all her data for the month. Then she thought about the way Jacob's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Okay," she said, pulling out her emergency granola bar from her desk drawer. "We're going to need more tea." She didn't know it then, but that moment, with the broken air conditioner, her declined credit card, and a trembling CEO in her tiny office, would be the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. What she did know was that for the first time in months she wasn't thinking about her own problems. Instead, she was focused on the way Jacob's shoulders relaxed slightly when she pulled out her coaching notebook, how his breathing steadied just a bit when she started asking him questions about his presentation. "First," she said, breaking the granola bar in half and offering him a piece, "tell me why this project matters to you. Not to the board, to you." Jacob stared at the offered granola bar like it was both a lifeline and a threat. Then slowly, he began to speak. And somewhere in the humid Manhattan night, as a wealthy CEO and a struggling consultant shared a stale granola bar in a too-small office, something unexpected began to take root. Something that neither spreadsheets nor coaching manuals could have predicted. But that would come later. For now, there was just this. A woman who helped others find their voice trying to ignore her own financial crisis, and a man whose net worth could solve all her problems, but who couldn't get through a presentation without his hands shaking. The clock on the wall ticked past 7 p.m., and New York City continued its eternal hustle outside the window. Inside, Nyota Wilson opened a fresh page in her notebook and wrote at the top, "Project, Finding Your Voice." She had no way of knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything she thought she knew about business, relationships, and herself would be turned upside down. All she knew was that she had 14 hours to perform a miracle, and she was already running out of tea. 3 hours into their emergency coaching session, Nyota discovered something about Jacob Alexander Blackwood III that wasn't in any public record or Forbes profile. When truly focused, he stopped checking his watch. It was nearly midnight, their 5th cup of tea growing cold, and his Patek Philippe hadn't been rotated once in the past 20 minutes. "Again," she said, perched on her desk because her second office chair had broken last week. "Tell me about the solar panels, but this time remember what we discussed about breathing." Jacob stood by the window, Manhattan's lights creating a halo around his tall frame. His suit jacket had long been discarded, tie loosened, and those few grey hairs at his temples caught the fluorescent light. For a man worth millions, he looked startlingly human. "The technology isn't just about energy," he started, his voice steadier than it had been hours ago. "It's about—" His hand twitched toward his watch. "Ah," Nyota raised her finger. "What did we say about the watch?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. 3 strikes, and I have to tell you why I really check it." "And that was strike 3. She crossed her arms, box braids falling over one shoulder. "Time to pay up, Mr. CEO." The silence that followed felt heavy, with something more than just humidity. Jacob turned to the window, and for a moment, Nyota thought he might refuse. Rich people usually did when pushed too far. "My grandmother gave it to me," he said finally, so quietly she almost missed it. "The day before she died, she took it off my grandfather's wrist and gave it to me. Said I'd need it more than he did since he'd—" Jacob's voice caught. "Since he'd run out of time." The office suddenly felt too small, too intimate for such a confession. Nyota unconsciously touched her own inheritance, the Ankh necklace warm against her skin. "She was the only one who knew about my anxiety," he continued, still facing the window. "Everyone else just called it perfectionism, said it was what made me successful. But she—" His reflection in the glass showed a vulnerability that made Nyota's throat tight. "She used to time my panic attacks with this watch, said if we could count the seconds, we could survive anything." Before Nyota could respond, her phone buzzed loudly against the desk. The screen lit up with a text from Sage. "Girl, where are you? It's midnight and your dinner's getting cold. Also, the super left another note about the leak." Reality crashed back in. She was sitting in a dark office with a virtual stranger, sharing things that felt too close to the heart, while her best friend waited up and her ceiling continued to crumble. "Sorry," Jacob said, immediately stiffening back into CEO mode. "You should go home. I've kept you too late." "No," Nyota said firmly, silencing her phone. "We've got momentum. Besides," she managed a smile, "my roommate's a chef at Le Petit Jardin. Trust me, her leftovers are better cold." Jacob's eyebrows shot up. "Le Petit Jardin? The 3-star Michelin restaurant?" "Sage likes to say she's just a pastry chef, but yes, she stress bakes when she's worried about me, which means—" Nyota's smile turned rueful. "Well, lately we've had a lot of pastries." Something shifted in Jacob's expression. He moved away from the window, rolling up his sleeves with precise movements. "My grandmother," he said carefully, "always claimed you could trust someone who admitted to struggling." He met Nyota's eyes directly for the first time all night. "How much does it cost to fix a ceiling?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Nyota straightened, professional mask sliding back into place. "We're here to work on your presentation, Mr. Blackwood." "Jacob," he corrected softly. "And we are. But I'm also here because every other communication coach quit when they realized I was—" He gestured vaguely at himself, at the way his hand had started its trembling again. "This. You're the first person since my grandmother who didn't try to fix me. You just helped me work with what I am." Nyota thought about her Instagram bio. Your voice matters, exactly as it is. How many times had she preached authenticity while hiding her own struggles? $3,427, she said finally. That's what the super quoted for the leak. But I'm not taking your money. Jacob nodded slowly, then reached for his discarded jacket. For a moment, Nyota's heart sank. Another client running from too much honesty. Instead, he pulled out a slightly crumpled paper. My presentation tomorrow. It's about making sustainable energy accessible to everyone, regardless of income. His hands trembled as he smoothed the paper. But the board, they don't trust me to lead a global expansion. They think a 35-year-old single CEO with anxiety issues is too much of a risk. He laid the paper on her desk. It was an email, printed out. Board members' concerns about his lifestyle choices and stability were highlighted in harsh yellow. They want someone more traditional, he continued, each word careful and measured. Someone settled, married, the image of stability. His blue-gray eyes met hers again. I have until the end of the year to become that person, or they'll pull funding from the entire project. The air felt electric, charged with something Nyota couldn't quite name. Outside, a siren wailed past, its red lights briefly painting the office in emergency colors. Mr. Blackwood, she said slowly, what exactly are you suggesting? He checked his watch. 1 rotation, 2, 3. I'm suggesting a business arrangement, one that could solve both our problems. His voice was barely a whisper now. Will you marry me, Miss Wilson? Just for a year? The ceiling fan chose that moment to give up entirely, sputtering to a stop with a sound like a dying breath. In the sudden silence, Nyota could hear her heart pounding, could feel the weight of her grandmother's necklace, could sense the absurdity and desperation of this moment. She should say no, should maintain professional boundaries, should... The board meeting is in 8 hours, she heard herself say instead. Let's get through that first, then we can discuss business arrangements. Jacob's relief was visible, even as he tried to hide it behind a professional nod. He rolled his sleeves back down, rebuttoned his cuffs with methodical precision. Of course, the presentation first. But as they turned back to their work, something had shifted. The night felt heavier with possibility, with danger, with the kind of decisions that change lives. Nyota's phone buzzed again with another text from Sage. If you're not dead in a ditch, I'm eating your portion of the failed chocolate soufflés. She didn't reply. How could she explain that she was watching a millionaire CEO practice breathing exercises while considering a proposal that was either completely insane or terrifyingly rational? Instead, she opened her coaching notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Lesson 2. Sometimes the scariest things to say are the truest. The clock ticked past midnight, and somewhere in the city that never sleeps, 2 people who should never have met began plotting something that would either save them both or destroy everything they'd worked for. And the night was far from over. The sunrise painted Manhattan in shades of possibility when Nyota finally unlocked her Brooklyn apartment door at 5:47 a.m. The smell of butter and vanilla hit her immediately. Sage had indeed been stress-baking all night. Before you say anything, Nyota called out, dropping her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, a failed pottery class attempt from last winter. I can explain. Oh, you better. Sage emerged from their tiny kitchen, her chef's whites dusted with flour and her purple-streaked black hair escaping its neat bun. Because I've made 4 different types of croissants, 2 soufflés, and an entire tray of macarons, trying not to imagine you murdered in some corporate office. Despite her words, Sage was already pushing a cup of perfectly made cappuccino, with almond milk because she never forgot Nyota's lactose intolerance, across their scratched kitchen counter. Also, she added, adjusting her colorful glasses, the super slipped another notice under the door. The leak is spreading to 4B's ceiling. Nyota sank onto their second-hand bar stool, the events of the night feeling suddenly surreal in their sunlit kitchen. She paused, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. I might have a solution for that, but you're going to think I'm crazy. Honey, I've known you were crazy since you left that cushy corporate job to help people find their voice. Sage pulled out a perfectly laminated pain au chocolat from a paper bag. But that's why I love you. Now spill. But before Nyota could begin, her phone buzzed. A text from Jacob. Driver waiting outside your building. Black Audi. Don't argue. You need proper rest before the board meeting. Also, Edison liked the granola bar you gave me. He stole the other half. Who, Sage said, peering over Nyota's shoulder, is texting you about their driver at 6 a.m.? And who's Edison? His dog, Nyota answered automatically, then winced as Sage's eyebrows shot up. You know a man's dog's name, but I had to hear about him through stress baking? Sage crossed her arms. Start talking, now. Outside, a car horn honked softly, twice politely, like even the car was expensive. That's... Nyota stood, gathering her emergency presentation outfit from the hallway closet. That's my ride. But I promise, when I get back from this board meeting, I'll tell you everything. Board meeting? Sage's voice rose an octave. You're wearing yesterday's clothes and you haven't slept. Trust me, Nyota called over her shoulder, already heading for the bathroom. This is either the best or worst decision of my life. I just haven't figured out which yet. 20 minutes later, freshly showered and wearing her power outfit, the black sheath dress with African print trim that made her feel invincible even when her bank account said otherwise, Nyota slid into the back of the Audi. The leather seats were heated, the air conditioning was perfect, and a garment bag waited on the seat beside her. From Mr. Blackwood, the driver said, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. He said you'd argue about it, but to remind you that board members notice details. Inside the bag was a Yves Saint Laurent blazer in cream with subtle gold threading, exactly the kind of piece that would make old money board members take a second look. It probably cost more than her rent. Her phone buzzed again. It's not charity, it's business. See you in the boardroom. Edison says good luck. Despite her exhaustion, despite the insanity of the situation, Nyota felt herself smile. She slipped on the blazer, it fit perfectly because of course it did, and opened her coaching notebook to review their strategy one last time. The drive to Jacob's office building felt like crossing a border between worlds. Downtown Manhattan rose around them, all glass and promise and power. The same streets she usually navigated by subway looked different from behind tinted windows. In the elevator up to the penthouse offices, Nyota found herself touching her grandmother's ankh necklace, its familiar weight grounding her. The night's events played through her mind, Jacob's trembling hands, the shared granola bar, the impossible proposal. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area, where a worried-looking assistant immediately rushed forward. Oh, thank goodness, she breathed. Mr. Blackwood's been asking for you. The board moved the meeting up 30 minutes. They're already assembling. Nyota checked her phone. No messages. Which meant, he doesn't know about the time change, does he? The assistant shook her head. He's in his office with the door locked. His anxiety medication is on his desk, but he hasn't taken it. Where? End of the hall, left. You can't miss it. Nyota moved quickly, her heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more than her entire education. She found his office exactly where promised, corner suite, magnificent view, and completely silent. She knocked once. Jacob? It's me. The door opened so quickly she almost stumbled. Jacob stood there, impeccable in a new suit, but with eyes that showed he hadn't slept either. His left hand was doing the watch rotation, 1, 2, 3 times. They moved the meeting, he said, voice tight. We're not ready, I'm not ready, I should take the medication, but it makes my thoughts fuzzy. And if I'm fuzzy, I'll mess up the numbers. And if I mess up the numbers... Jacob. Nyota stepped into his office, closing the door behind her. The room was minimal, expensive, and somehow sterile, except for a dog bed in the corner, where a beautiful golden retriever lay watching them with concerned eyes. Breathe with me. She moved to stand directly in front of him, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. Put your hands on my shoulders. He blinked. What? Trust me. Shoulders. Now. His hands were shaking when he placed them on her shoulders, but she stayed steady, anchoring him. Feel my breathing, she said quietly. Match it. In through the nose, out through the mouth, just like we practiced. Slowly, gradually, his breathing steadied. His hands stopped shaking. Now, she said, still maintaining eye contact, tell me why this project matters. Because, his voice was barely a whisper. Because my grandmother grew up without reliable electricity. Because she used to study by candlelight. And she always said that light should be a right, not a privilege. Good. Nyota nodded. What else? Because sustainable energy isn't just about saving the planet. It's about giving people dignity, choice, a chance to... A knock at the door. The assistant's voice. Mr. Blackwood, the board is ready. Jacob's hands tightened on Nyota's shoulders for a moment. Then something shifted in his eyes. The trembling stopped completely. Thank you, he said softly. Don't thank me yet. She stepped back, straightening his tie with professional precision. Thank me when we convince those board members that they'd be idiots to doubt you. As they walked toward the boardroom, Jacob's voice stopped her. About last night. About what I proposed. Nyota turned to face him. In the morning light, with Manhattan spread out behind him and Edison padding faithfully at his heels, he looked both powerful and vulnerable. A paradox in a perfect suit. First the presentation, she said firmly. Then we'll talk about business arrangements. He nodded, adjusting his watch one last time. But as they reached the boardroom doors, he whispered, "The blazer. It suits you." Before she could respond, the doors opened, and they stepped into a room full of people who had the power to change both their lives forever. Nyota touched her grandmother's necklace one last time and thought, not for the first time that morning, that some decisions looked crazy in the light of day. But then again, sometimes crazy decisions were the only ones worth making. The boardroom felt like a theater, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and Manhattan's skyline as the backdrop. 12 pairs of eyes turned to watch Jacob and Nyota enter, mostly older, mostly male, all wearing expressions that ranged from polite disinterest to barely concealed skepticism. Harrison Wells, the lead board member, checked his Rolex with deliberate slowness. Unlike Jacob's nervous watch-checking, this was a power move, pure and simple. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older judgments, "how kind of you to join us." And with his eyes swept over Nyota, lingering on her braids before dismissing her entirely, company. Nyota felt Jacob tense beside her. His hand moved toward his watch, but before he could complete the rotation, she shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing his arm, their agreed-upon signal for breathe. "Mr. Wells," Jacob said, his voice steady in a way that made Nyota's heart swell with unexpected pride, "I'd like you to meet Nyota Wilson, my communication consultant, and—" He paused almost imperceptibly. "Partner." The word hung in the air, its dual meaning a perfect shield. Professional enough for plausible deniability, personal enough to plant a seed. "Charming," Wells said, in a tone that suggested anything but. "Shall we begin? Some of us have lunch reservations at the Yale Club." Nyota moved to take a seat in the back, but Jacob's hand caught her wrist. His fingers were warm, steady, no trembling. "Stay," he whispered. "Please." What happened next would later be described by one junior board member as the most elegantly executed corporate coup he'd ever witnessed. Jacob didn't just present, he transformed. Every breathing technique, every grounding exercise, every authentic moment they'd practiced came together. He spoke about sustainable energy not with charts and projections, though those were impeccable, but with stories. His grandmother studying by candlelight, a single mother in Queens choosing between electricity and school supplies, a child in the Bronx doing homework under street lamps. "We're not just selling solar panels," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We're selling dignity, independence, the right to light." Nyota watched the board members' faces change. Even Wells's practiced indifference cracked when Jacob shared, voice steady but vulnerable, how his own anxiety had taught him that true strength comes from acknowledging weaknesses and finding solutions. "Yes, I get anxious," he admitted. "Yes, I check my watch and count my breaths, but I also built this company from an idea into a billion-dollar enterprise. Imagine what we could build together if we stopped pretending perfection is the only path to success." The presentation ended with a standing ovation from the junior members. Even Wells looked grudgingly impressed. But then, "Excellent presentation, Jacob," Wells said, emphasizing the first name like a weapon. "Very emotional, but our concerns about stability remain. A global expansion requires a steady hand, traditional values, family." He smiled, all teeth and threat. "You have until December to demonstrate that stability, or we'll be forced to re-evaluate leadership positions." The victory champagne was waiting in Jacob's office, along with Edison, who immediately bounded over to Nyota with a tennis ball in his mouth. The dog, at least, had no doubts about celebrating. "We did it," Nyota said, sinking into one of the leather chairs. "Well, you did it. I just—" "Saved me," Jacob finished. He wasn't looking at the champagne or the view or even Edison. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her throat tight. "You saved me. I guided you. You found your own voice." "About that." He crossed to his desk, pressed a button. His assistant appeared instantly with an envelope. "Your consulting fee." The check inside had more zeros than Nyota had ever seen. Her hands started shaking. Now she was the one who needed breathing exercises. "This is too much. It's not enough." Jacob dismissed his assistant with a nod, then waited for the door to close. But it could be just the beginning. The morning sun caught his grey temples, highlighting the sleepless night in his face. Yet his eyes were clearer than she'd ever seen them. "The board's ultimatum stands," he said quietly. "I have until December to become their idea of stable, traditional." He took a breath. "Married." Nyota looked down at the check in her hands. Enough to fix the ceiling, pay her mother's medical bills, keep her business afloat for months. "Mr. Blackwood, Jacob," he corrected softly. "Please, if you're going to reject my proposal, at least use my first name." Who said I was rejecting it? The words escaped before she could catch them. Edison's tennis ball dropped with a soft thud, forgotten. Jacob's hand went to his watch, but instead of rotating it, he simply touched it once like a talisman. "You're considering it." Nyota stood, moved to the window. Manhattan sprawled below, a city of possibilities and compromises. "I'm considering a business arrangement. 1 year. Clear terms, professional boundaries." She turned to face him. "And complete honesty between us, no matter what." He nodded slowly. "I have contracts drawn up. Everything spelled out. Your consulting business would be fully funded with complete creative control. Separate residences maintained for privacy. Clear exit strategy after 1 year. And in return, help me convince the board, convince everyone, that I'm stable enough to lead this company into its next phase. Be my partner in public. Help me." He gestured at himself, at the anxious energy that always surrounded him. "Make this work." Nyota thought about her tiny Brooklyn apartment with its leaking ceiling, about her Instagram followers who trusted her to be authentic, about Sage, who would absolutely kill her for even considering this. Then she thought about Jacob's grandmother studying by candlelight, about single mothers choosing between light and school supplies, about a man who built a billion-dollar company while counting his breaths. "One condition," she said finally, "anything. We tell Sage first. Over your driver's protests, I'm taking you to Brooklyn, tonight. My best friend is a stress baker, and if I'm going to make the craziest decision of my life, I'm doing it over the best croissants in New York." For the first time since she'd met him, Jacob laughed, a real laugh, unexpected and bright. "Deal." Edison barked once, as if sealing the contract. Neither of them moved for a moment, letting the weight of what they'd just agreed to settle around them. The morning sun painted shadows across the office, and somewhere in the building, Harrison Wells was probably already plotting their failure. But right then, in that quiet moment between decision and consequence, Nyota touched her grandmother's ankh necklace and thought about how sometimes the craziest choices were the ones that led us home. Even if home turned out to be a place we never expected to find. The Uber driver did a double-take when Jacob Alexander Blackwood III gave him the Brooklyn address. Even Edison, settled comfortably in the back seat between them, seemed to sense they were crossing more than just the bridge. "Your assistant looked like she might faint when you said you were taking a rideshare," Nyota commented, watching Jacob's reflection in the window. He'd removed his tie, and somehow that small act of dishevelment made him look more human than all their hours of coaching. "Addison has seen me have panic attacks in 3 different languages," he replied, absently scratching Edison's ears. "But taking an Uber to Brooklyn might actually give her a heart attack. Why didn't we take your car service?" Jacob's lips quirked. "Because showing up at your apartment in a chauffeured Audi would be—" He searched for the right word. "Too pretty, woman?" Nyota suggested, then immediately wished she hadn't as color crept into Jacob's cheeks. "I was going to say, inappropriate for our business arrangement," he managed, suddenly very interested in straightening his watch. The rest of the ride passed in comfortable silence, broken only by Edison's occasional happy sighs as they took turns petting him. It wasn't until they reached Nyota's building that reality seemed to hit Jacob. "Should I have brought something?" he asked, looking up at the pre-war building with its fading brick and fire escapes. "Wine? Flowers? What's the protocol for meeting your fake fiancé's best friend?" "The protocol," Nyota said, leading them through the lobby with its flickering fluorescent light, "is to be yourself. Sage can smell inauthenticity like burnt sugar." The elevator was out of order, again, so they took the stairs to the 4th floor. Jacob didn't comment on the peeling paint or the distant sound of someone's TV blaring through thin walls. Instead, he simply followed, Edison padding faithfully behind them. The smell of butter and vanilla grew stronger as they approached Nyota's apartment. She paused at her door, hand on the knob. "Ready?" Jacob adjusted his watch. 1, 2, 3 rotations. "No, but yes." The scene they walked into was pure Sage. The tiny kitchen looked like a high-end patisserie had exploded, every surface covered with baking sheets and cooling racks. Classical music, Sage's stress-baking playlist, competed with the whir of a stand mixer, and in the middle of it all stood Sage herself, purple hair now fully escaped from its bun, piping perfect rosettes onto what looked like a three-tier entremet. She looked up as they entered, her colourful glasses slightly fogged from the steam of whatever was in the oven. Her eyes went from Nyota to Jacob to Edison, then back to Nyota. "You better have one hell of a story," she said, setting down her piping bag, "because I've just stress-baked enough for a small wedding." The irony of her words made Nyota choke back a laugh. "Sage Alexandria Chen," she said formally. "Meet Jacob Alexander Blackwood III and Edison." Edison, sensing a potential new friend, or more likely smelling butter, immediately trotted over to Sage, tail wagging. Sage's stern expression softened as she knelt to greet him. "At least one of you has manners," she commented, scratching under Edison's chin. "The other two better start explaining why my best friend disappeared for 24 hours and came back wearing YSL. Jacob, who had been standing unusually still, Nyota recognized it as his anxiety response, stepped forward. "Ms. Chen, I can explain. First names only in this kitchen," Sage interrupted, standing up. And before anyone explains anything, she moved to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of champagne. "We're either celebrating something, or you're about to tell me something crazy. Either way, we need bubbles." 20 minutes later, they sat around the small kitchen island that doubled as their dining table. Sage had insisted they try her latest creation, a chocolate soufflé that Jacob declared the best thing he'd ever tasted, earning him his first genuine smile from Sage. "Let me get this straight," Sage said, refilling their glasses with champagne that probably cost more than their monthly rent. Jacob's contribution, delivered by a very confused Uber Eats driver. "You want to marry my best friend? For business?" "Yes," Jacob said simply. "And you," she turned to Nyota, "are considering this insanity?" "Yes," Nyota matched his tone. Sage took a long sip of champagne, then reached down to pat Edison, who had made himself comfortable at her feet. "You know what the craziest part is? I actually believe you're both crazy enough to make this work." "Really?" Nyota and Jacob spoke simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. "Oh God, you're already doing the jinx thing." Sage rolled her eyes, but her expression was fond. "Look, I've watched Nye build her business from nothing. I've seen her help people find their voice when everyone else told them to be quiet." She turned to Jacob. "And you came to Brooklyn in an Uber, ate my experimental soufflé without asking about calories, and your dog clearly adores you. These are all good signs." "But," Jacob prompted, his hand moving toward his watch before he caught himself. "But," Sage leaned forward, all traces of humor gone, "if you hurt her, they will never find your body. I know exactly how to dispose of evidence, and I have access to industrial-grade ovens." "Sage," Nyota protested, but Jacob was nodding. "I would expect nothing less," he said seriously, "and I promise this is strictly business, professional, clear boundaries." Sage looked between them, at the way they unconsciously leaned toward each other, at how Edison had positioned himself to touch both their feet. Her expression shifted to something Nyota couldn't quite read. "Right," Sage drawled. "Strictly business, clear boundaries. Keep telling yourselves that." She stood brushing flour from her chef's pants. "Now who wants to see my take on marriage-themed macarons? I stress-baked them somewhere between my best friend vanished and there's a CEO in my kitchen." As Sage bustled around, pulling out boxes of perfectly crafted French pastries, Nyota felt Jacob's hand brush hers under the counter. She expected him to pull away to maintain those clear boundaries. Instead, his fingers linked with hers for just a moment. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For having a best friend who threatens to murder me while feeding me the best chocolate soufflé I've ever had." Before Nyota could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Baby, why is Harrison Wells's wife calling me asking about you and some CEO?" The champagne suddenly felt less bubbly. Jacob's phone pinged next, probably his assistant with similar news. Even Edison lifted his head, sensing the shift in mood. Sage, returning with a box of gold-dusted macarons, took one look at their faces and sighed. "I'll get more champagne." "No," Jacob said, straightening his shoulders. "We need to get ahead of this. If the board's already making calls, then it's time to make it official," Nyota finished. She squeezed his hand once before letting go. "But first, we eat Sage's macarons, because if we're going to scandalize Manhattan society, we should at least do it on a sugar high." Sage raised her glass. "To clear boundaries." "To clear boundaries," they echoed. But as their eyes met over their champagne glasses, Nyota wondered if anything about this arrangement would ever be clear again. Outside, Brooklyn continued its evening symphony of sirens and street music. Inside, 3 people and a dog sat in a flour-dusted kitchen, plotting a fake engagement that felt more real with every passing minute. And somewhere across the bridge, Manhattan's elite were already sharpening their knives, ready to test just how unbreakable these clear boundaries really were. The dress arrived at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, delivered by a nervous-looking assistant who kept glancing around Nyota's Brooklyn neighborhood like she expected trouble. The Valentino label made Nyota's hands shake as she signed for it. "There's no price tag," she said into her phone, where Jacob had picked up on the first ring despite the early hour. "Because it's not for sale." His voice was soft, probably trying not to wake Edison. "It's from the upcoming collection. The PR team thought—" "The PR team?" Nyota interrupted, running her fingers over the fabric. Butter-soft silk in a deep burgundy that would complement her skin tone perfectly. A pause. "I might have mentioned you look beautiful in burgundy." Before she could process that, Sage emerged from her room, still in her chef's whites from the night shift. She took one look at the dress and whistled. "Damn, fake fiancé has good taste." "The Metropolitan Museum of Art annual gala," Jacob continued quickly, as if afraid Nyota might protest. It's where Manhattan society expects us to make our first appearance. My grandmother used to say these events were like gladiator fights, just with better champagne." Nyota sat heavily on their second-hand couch, the dress spilling over her lap like liquid garnet. "When?" "Tonight." She could hear him rotating his watch through the phone. 1, 2, 3. "I know it's fast, but after Wells's wife started making calls, we need to control the narrative," Nyota finished. PR strategy, at least, was familiar territory. "What's my story?" "Be yourself," Jacob said immediately. "The board already knows you're my communication consultant. We say we connected during late-night preparation for the presentation. Let them think." He paused. "Let them think I finally found someone who sees me. All of me." The raw honesty in his voice made her throat tight. That's actually perfect," she managed. "Close enough to the truth to be convincing." "The best lies always are," Sage called from the kitchen, where she was stress-baking again. "Also, if you're going to infiltrate high society, you need proper fuel. Come get these chocolate espresso croissants before I leave for work." Later that evening, Nyota stood in front of her bathroom mirror, touching up her signature eyeliner. The dress fit like it had been made for her, which, she realized with a start, it probably had been. Her box braids were styled high, threaded with subtle gold rings that matched her grandmother's ankh necklace. Her phone buzzed with tips from Jacob's PR team. "Stand close, but not too close. Laugh at his jokes, but don't overshadow him. The goal is to appear stable, traditional, appropriate." Another message popped up, this one from Jacob himself. "Ignore everything they sent. Just be you, please." The car service, no more Ubers, the PR team had insisted, arrived exactly on time. Jacob stepped out to help her in, and for a moment they both just stared. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her student loans, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. Clear, steady, no sign of his usual anxiety. Then she noticed his watch hand trembling slightly. "Breathe," she whispered, reaching up to straighten his bow tie. "Match my rhythm, remember?" He caught her hand before she could pull away, held it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. "Thank you," he said softly, "for doing this, for being—" "Your fake fiancé?" "Real," he finished, "for being real." The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed like a separate world. Photographers lined the entrance, and Nyota felt Jacob tense beside her as they approached. "3 things," she whispered, taking his arm. "Tell me 3 things about your grandmother." He glanced at her, surprised, but played along. "She loved jazz. She could bake perfect scones. The cameras started flashing. "Keep going," Nyota urged quietly. "She used to say that love was like breathing. You don't have to think about it, you just have to let it happen." They reached the top of the stairs, and the photographers were calling their names now. Somehow, they already knew who she was. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you're engaged? Ms. Wilson, over here. How did you meet? When's the wedding?" Jacob's hand found hers, squeezed once. Then, to her surprise, he turned to face the cameras with a genuine smile. "This is Nyota Wilson," he said clearly. "She taught me how to breathe." The headlines the next morning would call it the perfect society debut. Photos would show them looking elegant, in love, meant to be. What they wouldn't show was what happened inside. They wouldn't show Harrison Wells' wife accidentally spilling champagne on Nyota's dress, though they would show Jacob immediately giving her his jacket. They wouldn't show the whispered comments about social climbing and diversity hires, though they would show Nyota handling each interaction with grace that made several society matrons look positively common in comparison. They wouldn't show Jacob's near panic attack in a quiet corner when the crowds and expectations became too much, though they would show Nyota leading him in a perfect waltz afterward, her burgundy dress swirling as she guided him through steps that matched their breathing exercises. And they certainly wouldn't show what happened at midnight when they escaped to the museum's rooftop garden. Away from the cameras and judgment, they sat on a stone bench under the stars, her feet in his lap because the Louboutins, another gift, were killing her. "My grandmother would have loved you," Jacob said suddenly, massaging her ankle with surprising skill. "She would have seen right through this whole arrangement, but she would have loved you anyway." Nyota looked at him, really looked at him. His bow tie was undone, his hair slightly messed from running his hands through it, his watch finally still. He looked real. "Tell me more about her," she said softly. And there, with Manhattan spread out below them like a sea of stars, Jacob told her about the woman who taught him that strength comes in many forms, about scones and jazz music and learning to waltz in their kitchen. Neither of them mentioned that this felt less and less like pretending with each passing moment. Neither of them mentioned that his hand had moved from her ankle to lace fingers with hers. Neither of them mentioned that when a security guard finally found them at 1 a.m., they were sharing their third comfortable silence of the night. Back in the car, heading home, Nyota's phone buzzed with a text from Sage. "Saw the pictures online. If this is fake, you two deserve every acting award ever created." Jacob's phone pinged next, his assistant sending press clippings, all positive. The plan was working perfectly. So why did perfect suddenly feel like the scariest word in the world? As they crossed the bridge back to Brooklyn, Jacob had insisted on seeing her home. Nyota touched her grandmother's necklace and thought about what Jacob had said about love being like breathing. The problem was, she was starting to forget this was all just an act. And judging by the way Jacob's hand was still intertwined with hers, she wasn't the only one. 3 weeks after the Met Gala, Nyota's Instagram following had jumped to 25,000. Her leaked love story with Jacob had made the society pages swoon, and her ceiling was finally fixed. Everything was perfect, which is exactly why she should have known it would all start falling apart. It began with a notification on her phone during her Thursday live session. "Evolze Poder NW. Is it true you're dating Jacob Blackwood for his money? Das gold digger. Fake relationship." Her hand didn't shake as she deleted the comment. She'd been expecting this kind of backlash. What she hadn't expected was Jacob's reaction when she mentioned it later that evening. They were in his apartment for their weekly relationship strategy meeting, though lately these had evolved into comfortable dinners with Edison sprawled between them on the couch, sharing Sage's latest pastry experiments while reviewing their public appearances. "I'll have PR handle it," he said immediately, reaching for his phone. His watch rotated once, twice. A tell she now recognized meant he was more upset than he wanted to show. "Jacob, it's fine. Social media trolls are normal. Not for you." His voice was tight. "You shouldn't have to deal with this, any of this." She caught his hand before he could complete the third watch rotation. "Hey, look at me." He did, and the raw concern in his eyes made her chest ache. Over the past weeks, she'd learned to read him like a book, the slight furrow between his brows that meant an anxiety spike was coming, the way his left hand twitched when he was holding back words. "I knew what I was signing up for," she said softly. "Remember our agreement? Complete honesty." "Honesty." He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. Edison lifted his head, concerned. "You want honesty? I hate this. I hate that people are attacking you because of me. I hate that you had to change your whole life to fix my problems. I hate that—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "That what? That I can't tell what's real anymore." The words hung between them, too honest, too raw. Edison whined softly, padding over to nose at Jacob's hand. "Last night," he continued, quieter now, "I couldn't sleep. I found myself watching your old Instagram lives. Before all this, you were so free, so authentic. Now you're constantly watching your words, measuring your steps, all because of me." "Jacob, Wells' wife invited us to their Hampton house this weekend," he interrupted. "Another casual gathering where they'll judge every move you make, every word you say. I can't keep watching them try to tear you down." Nyota stood, her grandmother's necklace catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, Manhattan glittered, indifferent to their crisis. "You think I can't handle it? I think you shouldn't have to. That's not your decision to make." His watch hand twitched. "Isn't it? This whole thing was my idea, my proposal, my mess that you're cleaning up. Our agreement," she corrected sharply. "Our choice. Or are you the only one allowed to make decisions here?" He turned to face her, and for the first time she saw real anger flash across his features. "That's not fair." "No? Then why are you trying to protect me without asking what I want?" "Because I'm falling in love with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Edison froze, tennis ball dropping from his mouth. Jacob looked as shocked by his words as she felt. His watch hand trembled, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, he took a step back, then another, like he could physically distance himself from his confession. I should go," Nyota heard herself say. "This is my apartment," he replied, a hollow attempt at humor. "Right." She grabbed her bag, her movements mechanical. "Right, I'll have my assistant coordinate with yours about the Hamptons." "Nyota, wait." But she was already at the door, her heart pounding so loud she almost missed his last whispered words. "I'm sorry for making this real." The elevator ride to the lobby felt endless. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, probably Sage, who had a sixth sense for emotional crises, but she couldn't talk to anyone right now, couldn't process what had just happened. The doorman called her a car. No more Ubers, not since the engagement announcement, but instead of giving her Brooklyn address, she heard herself say, "Le Petit Jardin, please." 20 minutes later, she sat at the restaurant's kitchen entrance, watching Sage pipe delicate decorations onto a wedding cake. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Sage set down her piping bag. "That bad, huh? He's falling in love with me. And this is surprising because—" Nyota looked up sharply. "What?" Sage rolled her eyes, pulling out a batch of chocolate truffles she'd been experimenting with. "Honey, that man looks at you like you hung the moon. The only surprise is that it took him this long to admit it. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had an agreement, clear boundaries." "Ah yes, clear boundaries. Like how you keep his favorite tea in your office, or how he sends Edison to stay with you when he has late meetings because, and I quote, 'the dog misses you.' That's different. Is it?" Sage pushed the truffles toward her. "Or are you just scared because you're falling for him too?" Nyota's phone buzzed again. A text from Jacob. "Edison won't stop staring at the door. He misses you already. I miss you too. Can we talk?" "I can't fall in love with him," Nyota whispered, more to herself than to Sage. "The whole point of this was to be fake." "No," Sage said gently. "The point was to help someone who needed it. You're just mad because somewhere between breathing exercises and society galas, you both forgot to protect your hearts." Another text from Jacob. "I'll understand if you want to end the agreement, but please don't disappear. Not like this." Sage peered at the phone. "You know what I think? I think you're not afraid of the trolls or the society wives or even falling in love. I think you're afraid because for the first time in your life, someone sees you exactly as you are and loves you anyway. When did you get so wise?" "I bake wedding cakes for a living, honey. I've seen every kind of love story there is." Sage pushed another truffle at her. "Now you can either sit here stress-eating my experiments, or you can go talk to the man who just bared his soul to you." Nyota's phone lit up one more time. Her photo from Jacob. Edison lying by the door looking mournful with the caption, "We both miss your breathing exercises." "What if it ruins everything?" Nyota asked softly. "What if it makes everything real?" Sage countered. Outside, New York City continued its nighttime symphony. Inside Le Petit Jardin's kitchen, surrounded by the smell of chocolate and truth, Nyota Wilson had to make a choice. Her grandmother's ankh necklace felt heavy against her skin, reminding her that sometimes the scariest paths led to the most important destinations. She picked up her phone, started typing. "Edison's not the only one who needs breathing exercises right now. Send." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Sometimes the most terrifying thing wasn't falling in love. It was admitting you already had. The Hamptons house looked exactly like something out of a lifestyle magazine, all whitewashed elegance and old money confidence. Nyota watched it grow larger through the car window, her hand unconsciously reaching for her grandmother's necklace. In the 2 days since Jacob's confession, they'd managed exactly one conversation, an awkward phone call where they agreed to maintain professional appearances for the weekend at the Wells estate. Now sitting beside him in the back of his Range Rover, Edison between them like a furry emotional buffer, every mile felt heavy with unspoken words. "We can still turn around," Jacob said quietly, his watch hand surprisingly still. He'd been oddly calm since that night, like his confession had released some internal pressure valve. "And let Harrison Wells win?" Nyota adjusted her sundress, a casual Reformation piece she'd bought herself, refusing another of Jacob's designer gifts. "Not a chance." His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "There's my fighter." The "my" hung between them, loaded with new meaning. The Wells housekeeper met them at the door, her practiced smile faltering slightly at Edison's presence. "Mr. Wells didn't mention pets." "Edison is a registered emotional support animal," Jacob said smoothly, a line they'd rehearsed but had never actually needed before. "I'm sure Harrison mentioned my anxiety condition. It's been so well documented in the press." The subtle reminder of Jacob's wealth and influence worked. The housekeeper stepped aside, though her expression suggested Edison better not shed on any antiques. They were led to adjacent rooms. "To maintain propriety," the housekeeper sniffed, connected by a shared balcony overlooking the ocean. Nyota had just finished unpacking when a soft knock came at the balcony door. Jacob stood there, changed from his travel clothes into casual wear that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but somehow looked more vulnerable than ever. "Breathing exercise?" he offered, and something in her chest tightened at how well he knew her, knew she'd need grounding before facing the weekend ahead. They sat on the balcony chairs, Edison settling at their feet, and fell into their familiar rhythm, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The ocean waves provided a perfect counterbeat. "About what I said," Jacob started. "We should focus on the weekend," Nyota said simultaneously. They both stopped. Edison looked between them like he was watching a tennis match. "Ladies first," Jacob said softly. Nyota watched a seagull dive into the waves. "You know what's funny? I've spent years teaching people to use their voice, to speak their truth. And now I'm terrified of what happens if I use mine." Jacob's hand moved like he wanted to reach for her, but stopped halfway. "Whatever you want to say, whatever you feel, it won't change our agreement. I won't let my feelings complicate your life more than they already have." Before she could respond, voices drifted up from below. Harrison Wells and his wife Eleanor were greeting new arrivals on the front lawn. "Game faces on," Nyota said, standing quickly. Too quickly. Her sundress caught on the chair. Jacob reached to help, his fingers brushing her bare shoulder, and for a moment the electricity between them made it hard to breathe. "Nyota, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood-to-be." Eleanor Wells's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Do join us for pre-dinner drinks." The afternoon unfolded like a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Eleanor had seated Nyota next to Beatrice Montgomery, whose son had apparently been perfect for Jacob before Nyota came along. On Nyota's other side, Caroline Pierce kept making comments about how brave it was to wear one's natural hair to these kinds of events. Jacob, trapped in conversation with Harrison across the patio, kept shooting her worried glances. His watch hand was rotating again, 1, 2, 3 times. "So tell us," Eleanor said during a pointed lull in conversation, "how does one go from being a, communication consultant, to engaged to one of New York's most eligible bachelors?" The question was designed to wound, to expose, to remind everyone that Nyota didn't belong in their world. 2 months ago, it might have worked, but 2 months ago, she hadn't known that Jacob hummed jazz standards when he was happy, hadn't seen him dance with Edison in his kitchen at midnight, hadn't fallen, oh no. The realization hit her like a wave. Sage was right. She wasn't afraid of these women or their judgment. She was afraid because somewhere between fake and real, between business and pleasure, between breathing exercises and midnight confessions, she'd fallen in love with Jacob Alexander Blackwood III. The truth of it straightened her spine, lifted her chin. She touched her grandmother's necklace and thought about legacy, about authenticity, about finding your voice. "Actually," she said clearly, letting her voice carry across the patio, "it's a beautiful story. Would you like to hear it?" Every head turned. Even Harrison stopped mid-sentence. Jacob's watch hand stilled. "I teach people to find their voice," Nyota continued, standing slowly. "To be authentic even when it's scary, even when it feels safer to hide. And one night, this brilliant, successful man walked into my tiny office, terrified of being himself in front of the world." She met Jacob's eyes across the patio. His expression was unreadable. He could have hired anyone, could have bought his way out of his problems. Instead, he chose to be vulnerable, to do the work, to breathe through his fear. Her voice softened. How could I not fall in love with someone that brave? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. Then Jacob stood, crossing the patio in long strides. Eleanor Wells made a small sound of protest as he pulled Nyota into his arms. "You once told me," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "that the most powerful voice is the one that speaks truth." His hands framed her face. "So here's my truth. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Terrified because I've spent my whole life counting breaths and rotating watches and trying to be what everyone expected. Then you came along and taught me that real strength isn't in hiding who you are." Someone, probably Caroline Pierce, gasped as Jacob's voice cracked with emotion. "I love you," he said simply. "Not for show, not for business, not for any reason, except that you make me brave enough to be myself." Nyota was vaguely aware of Eleanor Wells dropping her champagne glass, of Harrison making some sort of damage control noise, of Edison barking joyfully. But mostly she was aware of Jacob's heartbeat against her palms, of the way his watch hand was perfectly still, of how his eyes held nothing but truth. "The agreement," she whispered. "Forget the agreement." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I want something real." Later, much later, they would deal with the fallout. With Harrison Wells' sputtering objections, with Eleanor's scandalized calls to the society papers, with the reality of turning their carefully crafted fake relationship into something authentic. But in that moment, with the Atlantic Ocean as their witness, and Edison wagging his tail hard enough to knock over an antique vase, Nyota Wilson did the bravest thing she'd ever done. She stopped pretending. "I love you too," she said, and kissed him. The society pages would later call it a scene straight out of a romance novel. They'd talk about the sunset, the ocean breeze, the shocked gasps of Manhattan's elite. What they wouldn't mention was how Edison started jumping up and down, how Jacob's hands trembled not from anxiety but from joy, how Nyota's grandmother's necklace caught the last rays of sun like a blessing. They wouldn't mention how, later that night, Jacob and Nyota sat on their shared balcony, her head on his shoulder, finally breathing in perfect sync without having to count. They wouldn't mention how sometimes the most real things start with pretense, or how love is indeed like breathing, natural, necessary, and impossible to fake forever. But Nyota and Jacob would remember. And so would Edison, who spent the rest of the weekend smugly accepting treats from the same society ladies who'd turned up their noses at him earlier. After all, nothing wins over Manhattan's elite quite like a love story, even if it didn't follow their script. The Monday after the Hamptons, Nyota's Instagram followers jumped to 100,000. Her DMs were flooded with messages about true love winning and breaking social barriers. The video someone had taken of their confession had gone viral, with celebrities and influencers sharing it as relationship goals. It should have felt like victory. Instead, sitting in her tiny office with a leaking air conditioner, different problem, same building, Nyota felt the weight of reality settling in. "Your 9 a.m. is here," her newly hired assistant, Jacob's insistence, announced through the intercom. "And there are reporters in the lobby." Nyota checked her phone. 17 missed calls from the PR team, 32 text messages from various society wives, mostly passive-aggressive congratulations, and one simple message from Jacob, breathing exercise. Before she could reply, her office door opened. Her 9 a.m. client, a nervous graduate student who'd found her through the viral video, stopped short at the sight of her. "Oh my God," the girl breathed. "You're really her. The one who taught Jacob Blackwood to be brave." Something in Nyota's chest tightened. This wasn't about her professional skills anymore. She wasn't just Nyota Wilson, communication consultant. She was Nyota Wilson, one half of New York's most talked-about love story. "Let's focus on you," she said firmly, gesturing to the chair. "Tell me what brings you here." But the girl couldn't focus, too starry-eyed about being in the same room as Instagram's favorite love story. After 15 minutes of trying to redirect the conversation, Nyota gently suggested rescheduling. As soon as the door closed, she called Jacob. "Hey." His voice was warm, intimate in a way it had never been during their arrangement days. "Bad morning?" "I can't do my job," she said without preamble. "No one wants communication coaching anymore. They want love story details. I'm losing my professional identity, Jacob." A pause. She could picture him rotating his watch, processing. "Come to my office." "That's not going to help the situation." "Trust me?" The simple question held so much weight now. Trust had gotten them into this situation. Trust had turned fake into real. Trust had Always, she found herself saying. Car's already on its way. 45 minutes later, Nyota sat in Jacob's pristine office, Edison's head in her lap, while Jacob paced by the windows. "I've been thinking," he said, stopping suddenly, "about authenticity, about voice, about everything you've taught me. Jacob, the board meets next week to review my leadership and the global expansion." He turned to face her. "I want to tell them everything." Nyota stood so quickly, Edison whined in protest. "What?" "The truth, about the arrangement, about how it became real, about how trying to be what they wanted actually led me to find what I needed." He crossed to her, took her hands. "I want to be brave, like you taught me." "You'll lose everything," she whispered. "The company, the project, maybe. Or maybe it's time for the business world to see that authenticity isn't a weakness." His hands were steady, no watch rotation in sight. "But I won't do it without your approval. This affects your life too, your business." Nyota looked around his office, at the evidence of power and success built on society's expectations. Then she looked at Jacob, at the man who'd learned to breathe through fear, who'd chosen truth over safety. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sage with a link to a business article titled, "From Consultant to Power Couple, The Rise of Nyota Wilson." "My business was built on helping people find their voice," she said slowly. "What kind of example am I setting if I hide my own truth?" Jacob's smile was brilliant. "Is that a yes?" "It's a, we do this together." She squeezed his hands. "But first we tell Sage. She'll kill us if she reads it in the papers." That evening, in Sage's kitchen at Le Petit Jardin after closing, they laid out their plan over experimental cream puffs. "They're filled with Truth Bomb vanilla cream," Sage explained with a smirk. "The board meets next Thursday," Jacob explained, while Edison tried to sneak cream puffs off the counter. "We tell them everything, how we started as an arrangement, how it became real," Nyota continued, "and how being authentic actually made both of us better leaders," Jacob finished. Sage looked between them, adjusting her colorful glasses. "You're really going to risk everything, the company, your reputations?" "Yes," they said simultaneously, then shared a smile. "God, you're disgusting now that you're actually in love," Sage groaned, but her eyes were soft. "Fine, but we do this right." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling in favors. Every food magazine and blog I've ever worked with. We control the narrative this time." As Sage made calls, Jacob pulled Nyota aside. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "I've been working on something, a backup plan." "What kind of backup plan?" He showed her his tablet. On it was a business proposal, a new company focused on authentic leadership training and corporate communication. The company name made her breath catch, Voice and Power Consulting. "Your Instagram handle gave me the idea," he said softly. "If we lose everything, we build something new, together, something real." Nyota touched her grandmother's necklace, thinking about legacy and truth and the courage to start over. "Together," she agreed, and kissed him. "Still disgusting," Sage called from across the kitchen, "but also, the press loves the idea. We go public with the truth next Tuesday. I'm thinking exclusive interviews, carefully chosen outlets." She paused, grinning. "And maybe a wedding cake tasting. You know, for authenticity's sake." Jacob and Nyota looked at each other, both remembering how this all started in a tiny office with broken air conditioning and a shared granola bar. "Too soon?" Sage asked innocently. "Actually," Jacob's hand found Nyota's. "I think it's perfect timing. Because sometimes the best things in life start with a lie, grow through truth, and bloom in perfect timing. Even if that timing comes with a side of Sage's knowing smirk and Edison's successful cream puff theft. The next week would bring chaos. Headlines would scream about deception and authenticity. The board would have to decide between tradition and truth, but right then, in a high-end restaurant kitchen after hours, surrounded by the smell of vanilla and possibility, none of that mattered. What mattered was how Jacob's hand felt in hers. What mattered was how Edison had cream on his nose. What mattered was how Sage was already sketching wedding cake designs, muttering about truth-tier flavors. What mattered was that sometimes the scariest truth sets you free, and sometimes love is both the question and the answer. The morning of the board meeting dawned clear and bright, the kind of autumn day that made Manhattan feel magical. Nyota stood in front of her bathroom mirror, carefully applying her signature eyeliner while her phone streamed early news coverage. Breaking: Jacob Blackwood and Nyota Wilson's shocking revelation. Power couple comes clean, the truth behind NYC's favorite love story. Authenticity versus tradition, can love save a billion-dollar empire? Her hand didn't shake. For the first time since this all began, she felt completely steady. A text from Jacob lit up her phone. Ready? Before she could reply, another message appeared. A photo of Edison wearing a tiny bow tie. For moral support, Jacob added. Then Sage. Turn on NY1 right now. Nyota switched apps just in time to see Sage, looking impeccable in her chef whites, speaking to a reporter outside Le Petit Jardin. Known them both since the beginning, she was saying, purple hair gleaming under the morning sun. And yes, it started as an arrangement, but watching them fall in love, that was real, that was beautiful. And anyone who thinks authenticity makes you weak has never tried my truth-themed wedding cake sampling menu, which, coincidentally, debuts next week. Nyota laughed through her tears. Trust Sage to turn their crisis into a marketing opportunity. The car service arrived exactly on time, but instead of the usual sleek Audi, a familiar yellow cab pulled up. Jacob stepped out, looking devastating in a Tom Ford suit, but with his watch conspicuously absent. No car service? Nyota asked as he opened the door for her. No more pretending, he said simply. This is how we started. You taking the subway, me learning to breathe. Seemed right to face this the same way. Edison, bow tie slightly crooked, barked his agreement from the back seat. The ride to Jacob's office felt like crossing a threshold. Every newsstand they passed showed their faces. Every radio station discussed their story. Their truth had become New York's favorite topic. Having regrets? Jacob asked softly, his hand finding hers. Nyota touched her grandmother's ankh necklace with her free hand. About the arrangement? Maybe. About where it led us? Never. The lobby of Jacob's building was packed with reporters. Through the glass doors they could see cameras and microphones waiting. Remember our first breathing exercise? Nyota asked, squeezing his hand. In that tiny office with broken air conditioning? His smile was tender. You shared your last granola bar with me, and now I'm sharing my life with you. The words came naturally, true in a way that no arranged story could ever be. Ready to breathe together? He brought their joined hands to his lips. With you? Always. They stepped out of the cab into a storm of flashing lights and questions. Mr. Blackwood, is it true the relationship was arranged? Ms. Wilson, were you hired to fake the romance? What does the board think about this deception? But before anyone could push closer, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Make way for my favorite power couple. Sage stood at the building entrance in full chef regalia, flanked by several burly kitchen staff members. Anyone who harasses them doesn't get to try my new Love Conquers All chocolate souffle, and trust me, you don't want to miss that. The path to the elevator cleared magically. Even New York reporters knew better than to get between a top chef and her culinary leverage. The boardroom looked exactly as it had that first morning, when Nyota had helped Jacob through his presentation. But this time, as they entered hand in hand, something was different. Harrison Wells stood at the head of the table, his usual polished smile notably absent. Jacob, Ms. Wilson, perhaps we could speak privately before... No, Jacob said clearly. Everything I have to say everyone should hear. Nyota squeezed his hand once, then moved to take her seat, but Jacob kept hold of her fingers. Actually, he said, I need you beside me for this. What followed would later be described by junior board members as the most authentic hostile takeover in corporate history. Jacob spoke about truth, how trying to fit the board's image of perfection had nearly destroyed him. How meeting Nyota had taught him that real leadership comes from authenticity, not appearance. Yes, our relationship began as an arrangement, he admitted, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, because you made me believe that I needed to be someone else to be worthy of leading this company. Murmurs rippled through the board members. Wells's face darkened. But here's what actually happened, Jacob continued. In trying to fake perfection, I found something real. Someone who taught me that my anxiety doesn't make me weak. It makes me empathetic, that my differences don't make me unstable. They make me innovative. He turned to face Wells directly. You wanted me to prove I could lead a global expansion? Well, our stock has risen 40% since Nyota came into my life. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. And our sustainable energy project? It's been featured in 3 international journals as a model of socially conscious business. Thanks to deception, Wells cut in sharply. Thanks to growth, Nyota spoke up, her voice clear and strong. Thanks to a man brave enough to admit he needs help sometimes. Thanks to a company culture that could learn to value authenticity over appearance. The board will never... Wells started, but a younger board member cleared her throat. "Actually," she said, "we took a preliminary vote this morning. The majority supports Jacob's continued leadership." She smiled. "It turns out authenticity is very appealing to younger investors." Wells's face went through several interesting colors. "So," Jacob said calmly, "we can either move forward together, building something real, or—" He shrugged. "Nyota and I already have backing for a new venture. Your choice." The silence that followed felt electric. Then, from the back of the room, slow clapping started. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman in an impeccable suit standing in the doorway. "Brilliant," she said, walking forward. "Simply brilliant. Mrs. Wells." Jacob blinked in surprise. Harrison Wells's mother, the largest individual shareholder and legendary businesswoman, smiled like a cat with cream. "Did you really think I built this company by caring about appearances, by following tradition?" She turned to her son. "Harrison, darling, do shut up and listen to the future of business." What happened next was a blur of votes and signatures and formal statements. But what Nyota would remember most clearly was the moment Jacob turned to her in front of everyone and said, "I have one more truth to tell." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his grandfather's watch. "My grandmother gave me this to help count the seconds until I found something real," he said softly. "I don't need it anymore. I don't need to count breaths or minutes or pretend to be anyone else." He held the watch out to her. "Because you taught me that real love is like breathing. It comes naturally when you're with the right person." Nyota looked at the watch, then at him. "Jacob, marry me," he said simply. "Not for show, not for business. Marry me because I love you. Anxiety and all, and you love me. Perfectionism and all." From the doorway came a suspicious, sniffling sound. They turned to see Sage, who had somehow snuck in with Edison, both wearing matching bow ties. "If you say no," Sage called, wiping her eyes, "I'm going to have to rename my entire wedding menu collection. Do you know how hard it is to rebrand Truth Leads to Love macarons?" Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the last of the tension. Even Harrison Wells managed a grudging smile. Nyota touched her grandmother's necklace one last time, thinking about legacy and truth and the courage to be real. "Yes," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes to the real thing." The boardroom erupted in applause. Edison barked joyfully. Sage started passing out what looked suspiciously like engagement-themed petit fours, and in the midst of it all, Jacob and Nyota shared their first truly authentic kiss. No cameras, no society pages, no arrangements. Just truth, just love, just them, breathing together, finally free to be exactly who they were. Because sometimes the best business decision is following your heart. And sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks truth, even if that truth starts with a borrowed granola bar and ends with a perfect soufflé. 1 year later, the co-working space where it all began had been transformed. Gone was the temperamental air conditioning and water-stained ceiling. In its place stood the flagship location of Voice and Power Consulting, its walls adorned with a single framed item, a slightly crushed granola bar wrapper in an elegant silver frame. Nyota stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, adjusting her grandmother's ankh necklace as she prepared for her first live workshop since the honeymoon. Her Instagram following had grown to over 1 million, but today's session was intimate. Just 20 people, each chosen for their authentic stories rather than their ability to pay. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jacob. "Guess who finally mastered the breathing exercises?" A photo followed. Edison in the new Voice and Power Therapy dog training program, demonstrating deep breathing techniques to a group of anxious executives. The golden retriever wore a tiny professional vest with their company logo, looking impossibly proud of himself. "Like father, like son," she texted back, smiling at how naturally the word father came now when referring to Jacob and Edison. Her next message was from Sage. "Turn on NY1, they're featuring the bakery." Le Petit Jardin had exploded in popularity after what the press dubbed the truth cake phenomenon. Sage's line of authenticity-themed desserts had become the must-have items at every major Manhattan event. The waiting list for her Love is Like Breathing wedding cake was now 2 years long. The TV mounted on the office wall showed Sage in her expanded kitchen, purple hair now streaked with gold, demonstrating her latest creation, the Voice of Truth chocolate sculpture series. "Each piece tells a story," she was explaining to the reporter. "Like this one. Inspired by my best friends who taught New York that sometimes the most powerful thing you can be is yourself." The camera zoomed in on an intricate chocolate piece, two figures sharing a granola bar, with a dog sitting between them. Nyota's eyes misted as her office door opened quietly. Jacob stood there, looking as handsome as ever in his casual Friday attire. He'd finally abandoned the formal suits except for board meetings. His former anxiety tell, the watch rotation, had been replaced by a new habit, touching his wedding ring when he needed grounding. "Ready for the big announcement?" he asked, crossing to kiss her good morning. "Shouldn't we wait for—" "I'm here," Sage burst in, still in her chef's whites. "Traffic was horrible, but I wouldn't miss this for anything. Besides," she patted her industrial-sized tote bag, "I brought celebratory macarons." They gathered around Nyota's desk, no longer tiny and cramped, but still holding that same energy of possibility that had been there the night Jacob first stumbled in. "Okay." Nyota took a deep breath, touching her still flat stomach. "Time to tell them." Jacob opened his laptop, connecting to the company-wide video call. Hundreds of faces popped up, their entire team across 3 countries, all waiting for the quarterly update. "Welcome, everyone," Jacob began, his voice strong and clear. No anxiety, no pretense. "Before we discuss business, Nyota and I have a personal announcement." He squeezed her hand as she stepped forward. "As you know, Voice and Power was founded on the principle of authentic leadership," she said, "so it feels right to share this authentically. In about 7 months, we'll be adding a new member to our breathing exercises." The screen erupted in celebration. Messages flooded the chat. Somewhere in the back of their main office, they could hear actual cheering. "Wait," Sage called out. "That's not all." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small bakery box. Inside was a perfect miniature cake with the words, "Make that 2 new members." Jacob's eyes went wide. "Twins?" Nyota nodded, tears flowing freely now. "Found out yesterday. Wanted to surprise you with the whole team." "Speaking of team," Sage added innocently, "I've already started designing the baby shower cake. I'm thinking of calling it Double the Truth, Double the Love." Edison, who had padded in quietly during the announcement, let out a supportive bark. His therapy dog vest now sported a new badge, Big Brother in Training. Later that evening, after the celebrations and video calls and endless hugs, Jacob and Nyota stood in their favorite spot, the rooftop garden of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The same spot where 1 year ago they had first begun to realize their arranged relationship was becoming something real. "Remember the first time we were here?" Jacob asked, his hand resting gently on her stomach. "When you taught me to waltz using our breathing exercises." Nyota leaned back against him. "And now we're going to teach 2 little ones how to breathe. Think they'll inherit my anxiety?" His voice held a hint of worry. "If they do," she turned to face him, "they'll also inherit your strength, my voice, Sage's creativity, and Edison's unconditional love. Plus," she smiled, "they'll have the best breathing coach in New York as their dad." From below came the sounds of the city, taxis honking, people laughing, life moving in its eternal rhythm. But up here, with the sunset painting Manhattan in shades of gold, they had their own rhythm, their own breath, their own truth. "I love you," Jacob whispered, his hand finding hers. "No arrangements, no pretense, no contracts. Just us." "Just us," Nyota agreed. "All 4.5 of us." Edison woofed softly, and they laughed. "Okay, all 5 of us." As the stars began to appear over the city that had witnessed their story, Nyota touched her grandmother's necklace one last time. The ancient symbol of life now felt different. Not a weight of expectations, but a promise of legacy, of truth, of love. Because sometimes the biggest lies lead to the deepest truths. Sometimes the most complicated arrangements lead to the simplest love. And sometimes, all you need to find your happy ending is a broken air conditioner, a shared granola bar, a nervous CEO, a voice coach, a stressed baking best friend, a golden retriever, and the courage to breathe together no matter what comes next. The end. How many times in your life have you pretended to be someone you're not for fear of not being accepted? Like Nyota and Jacob, we've all worn masks, whether in relationships, at work, or with family. But what if, like them, you had the courage to show your true self? What would your true love story be? Not just with someone else, but with yourself. Tell us in the comments. What was the moment when you chose to be authentic, even when it meant risking everything? She hugged the wrong man at the airport and ended up in a millionaire's arms. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The morning alarm shattered the silence at 4:45 a.m., a sound Milena Carter had learned to hate less than being late. Her fingers found the phone in the dark, muscle memory from 1,000 identical mornings. The dim light from the screen illuminated the exhaustion etched across her face, highlighting dark circles under eyes that had seen too many early mornings and late nights. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, a daily mantra that kept her moving forward. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to Luca's room, each step carefully placed to maintain the precious minutes of silence before their day began. Her son lay curled in his bed, star-patterned blanket wrapped tight around his small frame. Luca's world operated on precise routines, and waking him even 5 minutes early could derail their entire morning. Milena watched him sleep, allowing herself 30 seconds, counted in her head, to simply exist in this moment of peace. "Time to wake up, baby," she called softly, flicking on his dinosaur nightlight rather than the harsh overhead lamp. Luca stirred, his eyes opening with the careful deliberation that marked all his movements. No sudden changes, no unexpected shifts. The morning routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. Luca's blue cup filled exactly 3/4 with apple juice, his breakfast arranged in perfect triangles, clothes laid out in the exact order he would put them on. Milena moved through these motions while simultaneously preparing herself for work, her own breakfast forgotten in the rush. "Mrs. Henderson will pick you up for school today," she reminded him, watching his face for any sign of distress at the change in routine. "Remember, we talked about this yesterday. Mommy has to work at the clinic, then go to the airport to pick up Uncle Drew." Luca aligned his fork perfectly parallel to his plate, his way of showing he understood. Sometimes Milena wished she could step into his world, see how he processed everything around him. But for now, she had to trust the small signs he gave her, the subtle ways he communicated his understanding. The morning passed in its usual blur of activity, dropping Luca at Mrs. Henderson's, catching the 6:15 bus to the clinic, processing patients with a smile that hid her bone-deep fatigue. By the time her shift ended at 4 p.m., Milena's feet ached in her sensible shoes, and her mind was already racing ahead to her evening shift at the airport cafe. The text from her brother came just as she was clocking out, landing at 6:30, gate B12. "Miss you, sis." Drew was the only one who still called her sis, the only family member who hadn't drifted away after she'd become pregnant with Luca. His monthly visits were like oxygen, giving her precious moments to breathe, to remember she wasn't completely alone in this world. The bus ride to the airport was crowded, forcing Milena to stand swaying with each turn as she checked her phone repeatedly. Mrs. Henderson had sent a photo of Luca, methodically arranging his toy cars by color, his way of staying calm when his routine changed. The sight made Milena's heart ache. 6 years of single motherhood had taught her that guilt was a constant companion, as familiar as her own reflection. The airport terminal hummed with its usual chaos. Reunions, departures, lives intersecting in a constant flow of movement. Milena's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Drew's familiar leather jacket. Her brother always wore the same one, a comfort in the sea of faces that threatened to overwhelm her. Then she saw it, the worn brown leather, the slight tear near the right shoulder that Drew refused to repair. Without thinking, moving on pure emotion and exhaustion, Milena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You're late," she mumbled into the jacket, inhaling the scent that wasn't quite right, her tired brain taking too long to process the wrongness. The man turned, and Milena's world tilted sharply. Instead of Drew's familiar face, she found herself staring into startled green eyes that definitely did not belong to her brother. The man was taller than Drew, with carefully trimmed facial hair and an expression that shifted from surprise to something softer, more intrigued. "I don't think I am," he said, his voice warm and tinged with amusement, "though I'm suddenly wishing I was whoever you're waiting for." Mortification crashed over Milena in waves. She stepped back so quickly she nearly stumbled, her professional mask slipping into place like armor. "I'm so sorry," she managed, her voice steady despite the embarrassment burning in her cheeks. "I thought you were my brother." The man, who wore his expensive suit with the casual ease of someone born to wealth, smiled. Not the condescending smile Milena had come to expect from people of his obvious social status, but something genuine that reached his eyes. No harm done. "I'm Rowan." He extended his hand, and Milena found herself taking it automatically, her customer service training kicking in. His grip was firm but gentle, and for a brief moment, She felt the strange spark of connection that sometimes occurs between strangers in moments of shared vulnerability. "Milena," she replied, then immediately wondered why she'd given him her real name. She pulled her hand back, tucking it into her pocket where it still tingled from the contact. "I should go find my brother." "Of course." Rowan adjusted the strap of his leather briefcase, but his eyes didn't leave her face. It was nice being mistaken for him. Milena turned away, her heart pounding with an unfamiliar rhythm. She forced herself to walk, not run, fighting the urge to look back. She was 33 years old, far too old for this kind of schoolgirl embarrassment. She had responsibilities, a son who needed her, bills to pay, and exactly 45 minutes to find Drew before her shift at the cafe started. But as she walked away, she could feel Rowan's gaze following her, heavy with unspoken possibilities. And for the first time in years, something inside her chest fluttered, a sensation so foreign it took her a moment to recognize it as hope. She found Drew 10 minutes later at the correct gate, wearing a denim jacket and a concerned expression. "You okay, sis? You look like you've seen a ghost." Milena shook her head, pushing away the memory of green eyes and a gentle smile. "I'm fine, just tired. Come on, I've got to get to work." As they walked toward the cafe where she would start her evening shift, Milena deliberately avoided looking toward Gate C, where she'd left Rowan. She had learned long ago that some things weren't meant for people like her, single mothers working 2 jobs, women who counted every penny and still came up short, women who couldn't afford to dream. But that night, as she served coffee to travelers and cleaned tables with mechanical precision, she caught herself looking up every time the door chimed, and each time it wasn't him, she felt a small pang of disappointment that she refused to acknowledge. After all, real life wasn't a fairy tale. It was alarm clocks at 4:45 a.m. and carefully managed routines and doing whatever it took to keep your child safe and fed. It was being strong when you wanted to break and never, ever allowing yourself to want more than you could safely reach. Yet as she counted her tips at the end of her shift, Milena found herself touching her lips, remembering the smile she'd given a stranger, the first real smile that had crossed her face in longer than she could remember. And in the quiet of the empty cafe, she allowed herself exactly 30 seconds, counted in her head, to wonder what it might feel like to be held by someone who looked at her the way Rowan had, just before she walked away. Then the 30 seconds ended, and Milena Carter did what she always did. She straightened her shoulders, wiped down the counter one last time, and stepped out into the night, ready to face another day of reality. 3 days after the airport incident, the evening rush at Heaven's Cup Cafe brought its usual parade of hurried travelers and delayed flights. Milena mechanically wiped down the counter, her movements precise and practiced. The coffee grinder's familiar whir almost drowned out the overhead announcement of another postponed departure. She'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined him. Almost. Until he walked through the door at 8:47 p.m., wearing a grey sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, looking decidedly out of place among the tired passengers and their rolling suitcases. Rowan's eyes found hers immediately, as if he'd known exactly where she'd be standing. He'd traded his business suit for casual wear, but nothing could disguise the quiet confidence in his stride. Her heart performed an unauthorized somersault. "Just passing through?" Milena asked, her tone carefully professional as he approached the counter. She noticed he'd chosen the exact spot where the overhead light caught his eyes, making them appear almost translucent. "Actually," Rowan replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "I heard this place has the best coffee in the airport. We're the only coffee shop in Terminal C." Then I guess the review was accurate. Despite herself, Milena felt a smile threatening to break through her professional mask. She pushed it down, focusing instead on reorganizing the already perfectly aligned sugar packets. "For what can I get you?" "Whatever you recommend." He leaned slightly forward, reading her name tag with an intensity that made her skin tingle. Milena. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, made her fingers fumble with the paper cups. "Our house blend is popular with travelers." "Perfect." He watched as she worked, her movements quick and efficient. "You weren't here yesterday." The comment caught her off guard. She kept her eyes on the coffee stream, measuring its flow. "Tuesday is my day off." "I know. Now." The implications of his words hung in the air between them. He'd come looking for her yesterday, had probably planned his casual appearance, right down to the perfectly rumpled sweater that made him look more approachable, less like the CEO he was. Milena snapped a lid onto his cup with more force than necessary. 475. He handed her a 20, their fingers brushing briefly. Keep the change. I don't need. Consider it an apology for yesterday's wasted trip. His smile was disarming, genuine in a way that made her defenses waver. Though technically you owe me an apology too. You did hug me without permission. Heat crept up her neck. Shy, that was a case of mistaken identity. Still the best thing that's happened to me at an airport. He took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving hers, including this coffee, which is exactly as average as I expected. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. Then why are you drinking it? Because you made it. The simple honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Behind her, the coffee grinder started up again, filling the silence that stretched between them. Milena busied herself with wiping invisible spots off the counter, very aware of his continued presence. My shift ends in 20 minutes, she found herself saying, immediately regretting the words. I know that too. Of course he did. He'd probably timed his appearance precisely, the same way he'd chosen his casual outfit and his disarming smile. Everything about him screamed calculation, yet something in his eyes spoke of genuine interest. I have to get home, she added firmly. I have responsibilities. Let me drive you. I take the bus. I know. I saw you waiting at the stop yesterday. She stilled, looking up at him sharply. Are you stalking me? I'm trying to get to know you, he corrected, his tone serious now. Admittedly, not in the most conventional way, but something tells me you don't have time for conventional. He was right, and that irritated her more than his presumption. Single motherhood had stripped away any chance at normal dating rituals years ago. Between work, Luca's needs, and the constant juggling of bills, her life ran on a precision schedule that left no room for coffee dates or casual flirtation. I have a son, she said abruptly, watching his face carefully. He's 6. He's autistic. My life revolves around his needs. I know. This time, she couldn't hide her surprise. How? You have a photo taped inside your locker door. I saw it when you were getting your apron. He's wearing a blue shirt with planets on it, sitting on a swing. He looks happy. The detail in his observation touched something deep inside her. Most people's eyes glazed over the moment she mentioned Luca's autism, but Rowan had noticed not just her son, but the specific details of a photo glimpsed briefly through a partially open locker door. He likes space, she said softly, especially stars. He draws them everywhere. Tell me more. And somehow, in the quiet lull between customers, Milena found herself talking about Luca, about his careful way of moving through the world, his silent observations, his love of patterns and order. Rowan listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly engaging with her words. My shift is ending, she said finally, noticing the time with a start. I need to catch the 9:30 bus. Let me drive you home. Before she could protest, he added, no expectations, no pressure, just a ride home on a cold night. She should say no. Every life lesson, every hard-earned piece of wisdom screamed at her to decline, but her feet ached from a double shift, and the thought of waiting in the cold for a bus that might be late made her resolve waver. Just a ride, she said firmly. His answering smile was warm enough to chase away the evening chill. Just a ride. 20 minutes later, Milena found herself in the passenger seat of a car that cost more than she made in a year. The leather seats were heated, the engine barely a whisper as they pulled away from the airport. She gave directions in short, clipped sentences, hyper-aware of the growing distance between this moment and her normal life. Your brother, Rowan said as they waited at a red light. The one you thought I was. Tell me about him. Drew. He visits once a month, brings Luca small gifts. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful things. Last time it was a pack of glow-in-the-dark stars for his ceiling. Luca lined them up in perfect rows. You smile differently when you talk about them. What do you mean? Softer, less guarded. He glanced at her briefly. It's beautiful. The compliment landed like a physical touch. Milena turned to look out the window, watching familiar streets pass by. This is my stop, she said, as they approached her apartment complex. Thank you for the ride. Rowan pulled up to the curb but made no move to get out. Will you be working tomorrow night? Yes. Good. He smiled, that disarming smile again. I hear the coffee's terrible, but the company's worth it. Milena got out of the car before she could say something foolish, something that might encourage this impossible thing growing between them. But as she walked toward her building, she heard his window roll down. Milena! She turned, arms wrapped around herself in the cold. Thank you for trusting me with the ride, and with Luca. I know neither was easy for you. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and hurried inside. From her window, she watched his car idle for a moment longer before pulling away, its taillights disappearing into the night. Later, after checking on a sleeping Luca and paying the babysitter, Milena stood in her small bathroom, staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back seemed different somehow, less tired, more alive. "Don't," she told her reflection firmly. "Don't you dare hope." But as she turned away, she caught herself touching the smile that lingered on her lips, a smile that felt as dangerous as it did wonderful. In her son's room, the glow-in-dark stars cast tiny pinpoints of light on the ceiling, arranged in perfect lines. Milena stood in the doorway, watching Luca's peaceful sleep, and allowed herself to remember the way Rowan had listened when she talked about her son, not with pity or discomfort, but with genuine interest, as if Luca's differences made him more fascinating, not less. "Just a ride," she whispered to herself. That's all it was. But even as she said the words, she knew she was lying, because somehow in the space of one evening, Rowan Ellison had managed to slip past her carefully constructed walls and plant a seed of possibility that terrified her. Tomorrow would be Thursday. She would wake at 4:45 a.m. She would make Luca's breakfast, go to work, count every penny, and continue the endless dance of survival that had become her life. But for tonight, just for tonight, she allowed herself to feel the warmth that lingered in her chest, as bright and dangerous as the stars on her son's ceiling. Rain pelted the clinic's windows, turning the Friday morning rush into a blur of umbrellas and squeaking shoes on linoleum. Milena's fingers flew over the keyboard, processing insurance forms with mechanical efficiency, while her mind drifted to last night's conversation in Rowan's car. 3 rides home in 3 days, each one feeling more dangerous than the last. Ms. Carter. She looked up to find Dr. Stevens frowning at her, a chart in his hands. "Your son's prescription. You forgot to pick it up yesterday." Reality crashed back like a bucket of cold water. Luca's medication. How could she have forgotten? "I'm so sorry. It's okay." The older doctor's expression softened. "I know you're working double shifts. I filled it for you." He placed the paper bag on her desk. "But Milena, take care of yourself too." She clutched the bag, shame burning in her throat. 7 years of never missing a prescription, never dropping a single ball in the intricate juggling act of her life, until now. Until a man with kind eyes made her forget, just for a moment, the weight of her responsibilities. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Luca, having difficult morning. Won't put on blue sweater. Very upset." Milena's heart clenched. The blue sweater was in the wash. She'd forgotten to run the laundry last night after work. Another ball dropped. She typed back quickly. "Check his bottom drawer. Green sweater with silver buttons. Tell him it's like stars in the forest." 3 dots appeared as Mrs. Henderson typed. Long minutes passed before. It worked. He's calm now. Starting breakfast? Milena released a shaky breath, aware of how close they'd come to a full meltdown, all because she'd let herself get distracted by impossible dreams. The morning crawled by in a haze of insurance codes and patient check-ins. During her lunch break, huddled in the small break room, she pulled out her phone to cancel her evening shift at the cafe. She couldn't risk any more distractions, but before she could make the call, a new message appeared. "I have a serious question about coffee. Rowan." Her finger hovered over the delete button. Another message. "Does the terrible taste grow on you eventually? Or do airport cafe employees have special training in taste bud suppression?" Despite everything, she smiled, then immediately frowned at herself for smiling. "How did you get my number?" she typed back. "I may have bribed Joey from the morning shift with concert tickets. That's crossing a line." "I know. I'm sorry. I missed you this morning." The simple honesty of his words made her chest ache. She'd switched to an earlier shift at the cafe, specifically to avoid him. He'd figured that out too, apparently. "I have to go," she typed. "Work. Have dinner with me tonight." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm drowning," she wanted to type. "Because I'm one missed shift away from not making rent. Because my son needs stability and routine, not a mother who's suddenly acting like a teenager with a crush." Instead, she wrote, "Because this isn't real." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came. "It feels real to me." Milena turned off her phone, forcing herself to focus on work. But his words echoed in her head all afternoon. Through patient check-ins and insurance calls, through the steady drum of rain against windows. At 4:30, she stepped out into the wet evening, umbrella clutched against the wind. The bus stop was crowded with people seeking shelter from the rain. She checked her phone, now turned back on, and saw 3 missed calls from Mrs. Henderson. Her heart stopped. The voicemail played. "Milena, don't worry. Everything's fine. It's just, well, there's someone here. He brought Luca's prescription, said you left it at work. He's sitting with Luca now, actually. They're organizing Luca's car collection by wheel size. Luca's never let anyone touch his cars before." The world tilted sharply on its axis. Milena's fingers shook as she dialed for a rideshare she couldn't afford. 10 minutes later, she burst through Mrs. Henderson's front door, rain-soaked and frantic, and stopped dead in her tracks. There, on the living room floor, sat Rowan Ellison in his $1,000 suit, meticulously measuring toy car wheels with a ruler, while Luca watched intently. Her son's face held the focused concentration he only showed when something deeply interested him. "The red one has slightly larger wheels," Rowan was saying softly. "See, 2.4 centimeters instead of 2.3. Where should we put it in the line?" Luca's hand moved carefully, adjusting the car's position with precision. His shoulders were relaxed, his breathing even. No signs of distress at having a stranger in his space. "Perfect," Rowan nodded. "Exactly right. You have an amazing eye for detail." Mrs. Henderson appeared at Milena's elbow. "He's been here almost an hour," she whispered. "Luca hasn't made a single stress sound, not one. He even smiled when they started measuring." Milena's throat felt too tight to speak. She watched as Rowan handed Luca another car, maintaining the perfect balance of engagement and space that so many people got wrong. "The prescription," she managed finally. "I forgot. It's on the kitchen counter," Mrs. Henderson said. "He got it before the pharmacy closed. Said he noticed it on your desk when he stopped by the clinic." She paused. "How's Milena? Who is he?" "Nobody," she whispered. "He's nobody." But even as she said it, Rowan looked up and saw her. His smile was careful, contained, as if he knew he'd overstepped but couldn't quite bring himself to regret it. "Hey," he said softly. "Luca's teaching me about proper car organization. Did you know the silver Corvette has exactly the same wheelbase as the blue Mustang? But they're in different categories because the Corvette's hood is 0.3 centimeters longer." Luca held up the cars in question, demonstrating without words. His eyes were clear, engaged. He looked happy. "I should go," Rowan said, standing slowly. "Thank you for letting me learn about cars, Luca. Maybe next time you can show me your star collection." Luca didn't respond verbally, but he carefully placed the silver Corvette in Rowan's hand, a gesture that made Mrs. Henderson gasp softly. Sharing toys was not something Luca did, ever. Rowan seemed to understand the significance. He held the car with exaggerated care, examining it from all angles. "This is a very special car," he said seriously. "Thank you for trusting me with it. Would it be okay if I gave it back to your mum to keep safe for you?" A small nod. Rowan placed the car in Milena's palm, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," he said quietly. I couldn't stand the thought of you worrying about the prescription all night." She should be angry, should tell him to leave, to stop inserting himself into her carefully structured life. Instead, she found herself asking, "How did you know?" "About the cars, about how to talk to him. I Googled autism and routines after you told me about him, read some parent forums, learned about the importance of precision and respect for organization. The rest was just listening, watching, like he does." The simple thoughtfulness of it undid her completely. "Have dinner with me?" he said again. "Not tonight. I know tonight you need to be with him. But tomorrow, please." Behind them, Luca had returned to his cars, contentedly measuring and adjusting. Mrs. Henderson was pretending to dust nearby, obviously eavesdropping. The rain drummed against windows, and somewhere a clock ticked. Marking each second, she stood there holding a toy Corvette like it was the key to something she didn't dare name. "Okay," she heard herself say. Rowan's smile was like sunrise. "Okay," he echoed softly. He left quietly, carefully, the same way he'd apparently entered their lives. Milena watched through the window as he got into his expensive car, somehow not looking out of place, despite having spent an hour measuring toy cars on a suburban living room floor. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said behind her, "I guess he's not nobody after all." No, Milena thought, clutching the silver Corvette. He wasn't nobody, and that was exactly what terrified her. Because now, watching him drive away in the rain, She realized it wasn't just her heart at risk anymore. Somehow, without warning, Rowan Ellison had found his way into Luca's carefully ordered world as well. And if this all fell apart, when it all fell apart, she wasn't sure either of them would recover. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Milena stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection with critical eyes. She'd borrowed a dress from her clinic co-worker. Simple, sun, black, nothing fancy. But the woman staring back at her looked different somehow. Hopeful, terrified. "You look pretty, Mommy." She turned to find Luca in the doorway, holding his favorite blue blanket. He didn't make eye contact, but his fingers traced patterns on the soft fabric, a sign he was processing something important. "Thank you, baby." She knelt to his level, careful not to wrinkle the dress. "You remember what we talked about? Mrs. Henderson will stay with you tonight. Everything will be exactly the same as always. Except you." The simple observation hit her like a physical blow. Luca rarely spoke in complete sentences, preferring to communicate through gestures and single words. When he did speak clearly, it usually meant something significant was troubling him. "I'll be back before bedtime," she promised. "We'll still do our star count together." He nodded, but his fingers moved faster on the blanket. "The carman, he knows about wheels." "Yes, he does." His ruler was precise, to the millimeter. Milena's heart squeezed. Of course, that's what had won her son's trust. Rowan's attention to exact measurements, his respect for precision. Would it be okay if he came to visit again sometime? Luca considered this, his head tilted slightly. Either silver Corvette needs remeasuring. The carpet fibers might have altered the wheelbase. A car horn sounded outside, not Rowan's car, but Mrs. Henderson's ancient sedan pulling into the driveway. Milena checked her phone. 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes until Rowan would arrive. "Dinner at 6:55, she reminded Luca, as Mrs. Henderson let herself in. Then homework, then your documentary about deep-sea creatures, then bath at 8:30. "So I'll be back for stars at 9, Sue. I've got his schedule written down to the minute," Mrs. Henderson assured her, hanging up her rain jacket. "Though I doubt I need it. This young man keeps better time than my kitchen clock." Luca had already moved to the dining room table, arranging his homework supplies with mathematical precision. Milena watched him, guilt warring with another emotion she didn't dare name. "Go," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "Live a little. We'll be fine." At exactly 7 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside. Milena's hands shook as she checked her lipstick one final time. "Call me if..." "I will. Now go before you talk yourself out of it." Rowan stood beside his car, wearing charcoal slacks and a blue sweater that probably cost more than her monthly utilities, but his smile was nervous, almost shy, as he opened the passenger door. "You look beautiful." She slid into the leather seat, hyper-aware of every wrinkle in her borrowed dress. "Where are we going?" "I thought we'd try this little place I know. Very quiet, no crowds. They make incredible pasta." He glanced at her as he pulled away from the curb. "But if you'd rather go somewhere else?" "No, that sounds nice." She fiddled with her purse strap. "I haven't been to a real restaurant in ages. Usually it's drive-through between shifts or microwave dinners after Luca's asleep." "I know." His voice was soft. "You work so hard. I do what I have to do." "That's not what I meant." He navigated through quiet streets, away from the busier parts of town. "I meant it as admiration, not pity. The way you've built your life around Luca's needs. The way you keep going no matter what. It's remarkable. It's survival. It's strength." He turned down a tree-lined street she'd never seen before. "And it's one of the many reasons I can't stop thinking about you." Before she could respond, they pulled up to a small restaurant tucked between old brick buildings. Warm light spilled from its windows, and the sign above the door read simply, "Marco's." Inside, the host greeted Rowan by name and led them to a corner table, partially hidden by a living wall of plants. The privacy of it, the obvious consideration for her comfort, made something in Milena's chest tighten. "The owner's son is on the spectrum," Rowan said quietly as they sat. "That's how I found this place." Marco understands the importance of quiet spaces. Of course he'd researched that too, just like he'd researched how to interact with Luca, how to respect his routines. Milena unfolded her napkin, needing something to do with her hands. "Why are you trying so hard?" "Because you're worth it. You don't know me. I know you work 2 jobs without complaining. I know you count to 30 when you need to calm down. Yes, I noticed that. I know you organize sugar packets by color when you're nervous, just like Luca organizes his cars by wheel size. I know you hide your smile behind your hand, like you're afraid to let people see it. He leaned forward slightly. I know you're brilliant at mental math, but pretend not to be because it makes your co-workers uncomfortable. I know you sleep about 4 hours a night, but never let exhaustion affect how you treat people. Stop, she whispered. I know you're terrified right now, not of me, but of this, of wanting something for yourself, of letting someone else carry even a small piece of your burden. You don't understand. I can't let myself depend on anyone. He shook his head. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me know you, really know you. The way you are when you're not hiding behind schedules and responsibilities. The waiter appeared with water, giving Milena a moment to compose herself. She took a sip, letting the cold liquid soothe her tight throat. My life is those schedules and responsibilities. They're not a mask I can just take off. I know that too. Rowan's eyes held hers. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm asking if I can be part of it. All of it. The early mornings, the double shifts, the toy car measurements, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. Why? Because from the moment you hugged the wrong person in an airport, my perfectly ordered world stopped making sense. And for the first time in my life, I don't want it to make sense. I just want... What? You. Just as you are. Schedules, responsibilities, and all. The candle between them flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face. In its warm light, Milena could see the genuine emotion in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached across the table. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, he said softly. We can just have dinner, talk, be ourselves. Be ourselves, as if it were that simple, as if herself wasn't split into 1,000 pieces, each one carefully measured and allocated to the tasks that kept her small world turning. But as she looked at him in the candlelight, she remembered how he'd sat on Mrs. Henderson's floor, measuring toy cars with the same care he probably used in corporate boardrooms, how he'd researched autism and quiet restaurants, and all the little details that made up her life. Okay, she said finally, uncurling her fingers from her napkin. Let's have dinner. His smile was worth every moment of terror that had preceded it. Okay. But I should warn you, the pasta here really is incredible. You might have to come back again just to try everything on the menu. Is that a threat or a promise? Both, he said, and the warmth in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket. Definitely both. As their waiter approached with menus, Milena found herself doing something dangerous. She began to hope, just a little, just enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, the woman in the borrowed dress deserved more than survival. She checked her phone quickly. 8:15 p.m. Luca would be finishing his documentary now, preparing for his bath routine, everything running exactly on schedule, except her heart, which had decided to beat to an entirely new rhythm. Sunday mornings belonged to Luca. It was their one unbreakable rule, the only time Milena never took shifts or made appointments. They had a routine, pancakes shaped like stars, documentary reruns, and quiet hours where Luca would draw while Milena caught up on bills. But this Sunday felt different. Your pancake has uneven points, Luca observed, studying his breakfast with mathematical precision. 3 millimeters off on the left side. I'm sorry, baby. Should I make another one? He considered this, head tilted. No. Imperfections can be interesting. Like the carman's watch, Milena's hand stilled over the griddle. What about his watch? It was 2 minutes fast, but he knew it was 2 minutes fast. He adjusted his measurements accordingly. Of course he had. Of course Rowan had noticed his watch's inaccuracy and explained it to Luca, just like he'd noticed everything else about their lives, fitting himself into their carefully structured world with a patience that made her chest ache. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter. She already knew who it was. Good morning. I keep smiling at nothing. People on the street probably think I'm crazy. Despite herself, Milena smiled too. Last night had been perfect. The quiet restaurant, the easy conversation, the way Rowan had listened, really listened, as she talked about her dreams of going back to school someday, of making a better life for Luca. He'd driven her home exactly on schedule, getting her back for Luca's bedtime star count without a minute to spare. You are crazy, she typed back. Who smiles on a Sunday morning? People who had the best dinner of their lives last night. Another text followed quickly. Too much. I'm trying not to overwhelm you, but I'm not very good at hiding how I feel. The honesty of it made her breath catch. She glanced at Luca, who was now measuring his orange juice level with careful eyes. Sunday is Luca time, she replied. No distractions. I know. Family day. I respect that completely. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. Both of you, both of you. Not many men included her son in their morning after texts. Then again, Rowan wasn't like many men. Mom? Luca's voice pulled her attention back. The calendar is wrong. She followed his pointing finger to the kitchen wall calendar. Someone, probably Mrs. Henderson, had marked the upcoming Friday with a bright red circle. Parent-teacher conference? Milena read, her stomach dropping. She'd completely forgotten. It's okay, baby. I'll request the morning off from the clinic. But even as she said it, she knew it would be a problem. Doctor Stevens had already approved her taking Thursday morning off for Luca's dental appointment, asking for Friday too. Her phone buzzed again. If you need anything, even just a coffee delivery or a grocery run, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations, just here. Milena stared at the message until the letters blurred. It would be so easy to lean on him, to accept the help he so genuinely offered, but dependency was a slippery slope she couldn't afford to start down. "Dear Mum." Luca's voice had taken on the slight edge that signaled rising anxiety. The calendar is wrong. I know, baby. We'll figure it out. No. Look, he pointed again, more insistently. The phases of the moon, they're incorrect. She looked closer. Sure enough, the calendar showed a full moon for next weekend when it should be a waning crescent. Such a small detail. But to Luca, these accuracies mattered deeply. Oh, you're right, she said, relieved to focus on a problem she could actually solve. Should we fix it? He nodded, already reaching for his special astronomy book, the one he used to track lunar phases. They spent the next hour carefully updating each month, Luca's tension easing as order was restored to his world. If only her own world could be fixed so easily. The rest of the morning passed in their usual Sunday rhythm, but Milena's mind kept drifting to the upcoming week's logistics. She'd have to dip into the emergency fund, again, to cover Mrs. Henderson's extra hours, maybe pick up an extra cafe shift to make up the difference, but that would mean less time with Luca, more disruption to his routine. Her phone lit up with a text from her clinic supervisor. Schedule change. Dr. Walsh called in sick. Need you to cover Thursday morning, the same time as Luca's dental appointment. The appointment they'd waited 3 months for, with the only pediatric dentist in town who specialized in autistic children. Milena's hands shook as she typed back, "Please, I have my son's appointment. Sorry, no other coverage available. Dr. Stevens is at a conference." She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. One more impossible choice in a life full of them. Her phone buzzed again. "Rowan, I know it's Sunday family time, but I just drove past the most amazing telescope in a store window. Made me think of Luca. Would it be okay if I sent you a picture? Only if it won't disrupt anything." The thoughtfulness of it, asking permission before even sending a photo, made something inside her crack. Before she could stop herself, she hit the call button. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, so I'm sorry if I... Do you really want to be part of this?" she interrupted, her voice low so Luca wouldn't hear from the living room. "All of it? The hard parts too?" "Yes." No hesitation, no qualification, just simple truth. "I need..." She swallowed hard. "I need someone to take Luca to the dentist on Thursday morning. Mrs. Henderson can't do it, and I just got called into work, and it's a special appointment we can't reschedule, and..." "What time? You don't even know if you're free." "I'll make myself free." "What time?" she told him, adding quickly, "But you have to understand, he needs exact routine. The appointment is at 10:15. You'd need to pick him up at exactly 9:47 to account for traffic. He'll want to sit in the back seat, left side only. He'll need his blue comfort bag with his headphones and..." "Milena," his voice was gentle, "send me a detailed list. I'll follow it to the letter, I promise." "Why are you doing this?" "Because I meant what I said last night. I want all of it. The schedules, the precise measurements, the hard choices, the beautiful moments, all of it." Through the doorway, she could see Luca in his usual Sunday spot, carefully drawing his weekly star chart. His face held the peaceful focus that came with doing something he loved. "The telescope," she said finally. "Show me the picture." She could hear Rowan's smile. "Actually, what if I brought it by, later, after dinner? Only if it won't disrupt his routine. We could set it up on your balcony, make it part of the bedtime star count." Milena thought of her tiny apartment, so different from the world Rowan came from. Thought of all the reasons she should say no. "The star count is at 9, she said instead. "Don't be late." "I wouldn't dare. I hear timing is everything in this family." Family. The word echoed in her chest like a bell. After they hung up, Milena stood in her small kitchen, looking at the calendar with its newly corrected moon phases, at her son, contentedly drawing stars, at the morning sunlight that somehow seemed brighter than usual. "Mom," Luca called from the living room, "can we add a new constellation to the chart tonight?" She smiled, feeling the weight of impossible choices lift just a little. "Yes, baby. I think tonight would be perfect for that, because maybe, just maybe, there was room in their carefully measured world for one more set of stars." Thursday morning arrived with the weight of 1,000 uncertainties. Milena had been awake since 3 a.m., reviewing the exhaustively detailed instructions she'd written for Rowan. 6 pages, color-coded, with timestamps for every potential scenario. "Remember, baby," she knelt before Luca as he finished his precisely portioned breakfast. "Today is different. Mr. Rowan will take you to Dr. Mason's office." Luca aligned his fork perfectly parallel to his empty plate. "The car man. His ruler is accurate. Yes, he's very careful about measurements." She checked her phone, 9:39 a.m. "He'll be here in exactly 8 minutes. 8 minutes is enough time to brush teeth following the correct pattern." Milena smiled, relief flooding her chest at his calm acceptance. The telescope visit on Sunday had helped enormously. Rowan had arrived at exactly 8:57 p.m., the professional-grade telescope carefully packed in his car. He'd let Luca inspect every piece, measuring and cataloging each component while explaining their functions with scientific precision. Her phone buzzed. 5 minutes away. "Following the route you mapped exactly." Of course he was. He'd spent 2 hours yesterday driving the route at different times, calculating traffic patterns and potential delays, just like he'd visited the dentist's office in advance, photographing the waiting room so Luca could preview the space. At exactly 9:47 a.m., a soft knock echoed through the apartment. Luca looked up from his toothbrushing routine, eyes focused on the middle distance. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, 0.5 seconds apart. Milena opened the door to find Rowan in casual clothes, the same kind Luca's occupational therapist wore, holding a small bag. "I brought something," he said quietly, "but only if it won't disrupt his routine. It's a pocket star chart with precise measurements of constellations. I thought it might help during the appointment." The thoughtfulness made her throat tight. "You can show him in the car, left back seat." "I remember." He held up a printed copy of her instructions. "I memorized everything, and I'll text you updates every 15 minutes. I'm sorry about all this. I know you probably had important meetings." "Hey." His voice was soft but firm. "Nothing is more important than this, than him, than you." Before she could respond, Luca emerged from the bathroom, blue comfort bag clutched to his chest. His eyes darted to Rowan, then away. "Hello, Luca," Rowan said, maintaining the precise distance specified in Milena's notes. "I brought something for you to measure later, if you'd like. But first, we should leave in exactly 2 minutes to maintain our schedule." Luca's shoulders relaxed slightly at the mention of schedules and measurements. He moved toward the door with careful steps, pausing to line up his shoes perfectly before putting them on. "Mom," his voice was barely a whisper, "you'll be here at 11:43? "Yes, baby. I'll be waiting right here." "And the stars tonight?" "Same as always." 9 o'clock? He nodded once, then walked to the car with measured steps, Rowan following at the exact distance Milena had specified. She watched from the window as Luca settled into his preferred seat, as Rowan checked the seatbelt with careful attention to pressure and angle. Her phone buzzed. "We're okay." He's looking at the star chart. "Deep breaths, Mama." Milena pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back tears as she watched them drive away. For 6 years, she'd done everything alone. Every doctor's appointment, every meltdown, every small victory and crushing setback. And now, the clinic was busy, but Milena's mind kept drifting to her phone, waiting for Rowan's updates. 9:58 a.m. Traffic light at Main Street was red. Adjusted route to maintain schedule. 10:07 a.m. Arrived at parking lot. Luca measuring parking space lines with pocket ruler. 10:13 a.m. In waiting room. Star chart helping with fluorescent lights. 10:22 a.m. Dr. Mason letting him inspect tools before starting. All measurements recorded in his notebook. 10:45 a.m. Cleaning complete. No distress. He's amazing, Milena. She was processing insurance forms when the final update came through, accompanied by a photo. Her hands shook as she opened it. There was Luca, sitting in the dentist's chair, actually smiling as he held up a small certificate. Below it, Rowan had written, First cavity-free checkup. We celebrated by measuring the exact angle of the dentist's chair recline. Relief made her legs weak. She ducked into the break room, needing a moment to compose herself. But before she could, another text arrived. He asked if we could stop at the store to buy a protractor. Said his star charts need more precise angles. I know it's not in the schedule, but... Milena stared at the message, understanding the weight of what he was really asking. Any deviation from routine could trigger anxiety, could spiral into a meltdown, but Luca had asked, had actually verbalized a want. That alone was huge. "What does your gut tell you?" she typed back. He's calm, focused. The star chart kept him grounded through the appointment. I think he feels safe. Safe. The word every special needs parent dreams of hearing. "Okay," she replied, but no more than 15 minutes in the store. Already mapped the shortest route to the checkout counter. We'll be home by 11:43. She returned to her desk, trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the image of her son, smiling in that dentist's chair, of Rowan Vegason who measured parking spaces and memorized schedules, and understood that love sometimes looked like precise angles and carefully counted seconds. At exactly 11:41 a.m., she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. 2 sets, one careful and measured, one slightly longer, but deliberately matched to the first. "Mom!" Luca's voice held an excitement she rarely heard. "We found a protractor with digital display, accurate to 0.01 degrees. She turned to find them in the doorway, Luca clutching a small shopping bag, Rowan standing slightly behind him with an expression that held something deeper than pride. "The car man helped me calculate the optimal angle for Orion viewing," Luca continued, his words coming faster than usual. "Did you know that stellar parallax requires precise trigonometric functions?" "I didn't," she said softly, watching as her son, her beautiful, brilliant, often silent son, practically vibrated with enthusiasm. "Tell me more." Rowan caught her eye over Luca's head as the boy launched into a detailed explanation of astronomical measurements. His smile held no triumph, no pride in his accomplishment, only genuine joy at Luca's happiness. "I should go," he said, when Luca paused for breath. "Let you get back to work." "No?" The word surprised them both. "I mean, it's my lunch break. Maybe we could all get something if that wouldn't disrupt." "Lunch is at 12:15, Luca supplied. 31 minutes from now. Sufficient time to calculate stellar angles while waiting." Rowan's eyes never left Milena's face. "I'd like that, if you're sure." She wasn't sure about anything, except the way her son's hands moved with excitement as he talked about stars, and the way Rowan watched them both like they were the center of his universe. "I'm sure," she said softly. "After all, we need to verify those stellar parallax calculations, right?" Luca nodded seriously. "So multiple observers improve accuracy." "They do," Rowan agreed, and Milena heard the deeper meaning in his words. "They really do." As they walked to the cafe down the street, Milena watched her son measuring sidewalk cracks with his new protractor. While Rowan listened intently to each calculation, something was shifting, changing, like the slow rotation of stars across the night sky. And for the first time in years, she didn't try to measure or control it. She just let it be, as vast and beautiful as the constellations Luca loved so much. The first sign of trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after the dental appointment. Milena was at her clinic desk when an email notification lit up her screen. "From Lawrence, Ellison Ecotech Global. Com. Subject. Regarding my son's recent activities." Her stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come, the moment when Rowan's world collided with hers in ways that couldn't be measured or controlled. Ems. "Carter, I'll be direct. My son's recent behavior has become concerning. Missed board meetings, declined social engagements, time spent in questionable neighborhoods. I've had you investigated, of course. Single mother, 2 jobs, special needs child. I'm sure you understand how this appears. I'm prepared to offer compensation for your discretion and immediate withdrawal from my son's life. Please reply with your terms. Lawrence Ellison, CEO, Ecotech Global." The words blurred as tears threatened, not from the insult, but from the clinical precision of it. The way he'd listed her life circumstances like defects to be catalogued. Her phone buzzed with Rowan's daily morning message. "Just remembered how you laughed at that terrible joke I told last night. Makes meetings bearable." They'd had dinner again, simple takeout in her apartment, while Luca measured the exact angles of paper airplanes Rowan taught him to fold. It had been perfect. Normal. Real. Another email notification. Meeting reminder. Parent-teacher conference. 2:30 p.m. Reality crashed back. She still hadn't found coverage for her clinic shift. Dr. Stevens was sympathetic but firm. They were short-staffed, and she'd already taken too much time off recently. Her phone lit up again. Everything okay? You usually send a laughing emoji to mock my jokes by now. Milena stared at the message, then at the email from Rowan's father. The contrast between them made her chest ache. Can't talk now, she typed back. Work. She turned off her phone, unable to bear his response. The morning crawled by in a haze of insurance forms and appointment scheduling. At lunch, she checked her messages. Miss you already. Found a new constellation chart Luca might like. Everything all right? You seem distant. Milena. And then, sent just minutes ago. I'm worried. Please talk to me. She was composing a reply when Dr. Stevens appeared at her desk. Milena, there's someone here to see you. Her heart stopped as she looked up, expecting Rowan. Instead, she found herself facing an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Ms. Carter. The woman's smile was practiced, professional. I'm Regina Ellison, Rowan's mother. Might we speak privately? The break room felt smaller than usual, its fluorescent lights harsh against Regina's expensive jewelry. She declined the offered chair, preferring to stand with perfect posture. I'll be brief, Regina said, her voice soft but steel-edged. You seem like a sensible woman. You must understand this. Dalliance cannot continue. Milena forced herself to meet the older woman's eyes. With all due respect, that's between Rowan and me. Is it? Regina's perfectly manicured fingers traced the edge of a nearby table. Tell me, how does your son handle change? Disruption to his routine? What happens when this inevitably ends badly? The question hit like a physical blow, because of course she'd thought about it. Of course she'd lain awake at night, terrified of what would happen to Luca when, not if, this fell apart. Rowan is a good man, Regina continued, almost gently. He means well, but he's lived a certain way his entire life. Board meetings, charity galas, social obligations. Do you really see yourself fitting into that world? More importantly, do you see your son surviving in it? You don't know anything about my son. I know he's autistic. I know routine is crucial for him. I know any disruption to his carefully ordered world could be devastating. She paused. I also know about the parent-teacher conference you're missing today, the one Rowan offered to attend in your place. Milena's head snapped up. How did you... We have resources, Ms. Carter. We protect our own. Regina's voice softened marginally. You seem like a good mother. You've built a stable life for your son. Why risk destabilizing it for a relationship that can't possibly last? Before Milena could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Henderson. Luca, very anxious about conference. Keeps checking clock. Need response about who's attending. Reality crashed in like a wave. In all the morning's chaos, she hadn't confirmed with Rowan about the conference, hadn't responded to his messages, hadn't done anything except let her carefully structured world start to unravel. Think about it, Regina said, moving toward the door. For everyone's sake. She left Milena standing in the break room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Another message appeared. Rowan again. Just say the word, and I'll handle the conference. Already cleared my schedule. Trust me with this, please. Trust. Such a small word for such an impossible thing. Her fingers shook as she typed, I can't. I'm sorry. I just can't. She turned off her phone before his response came through. Then she did something she'd never done in 6 years of single motherhood. She broke down at work. Dr. Stevens found her 10 minutes later, still trying to pull herself together. One look at her face and he sighed. Go. What? Go to your son's conference. Family comes first. We'll manage. But you said... I know what I said. I also know that sometimes being a good boss means knowing when to break your own rules. He smiled kindly. Besides, you haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. Consider this one earned. Milena grabbed her purse with trembling hands. Thank you. I'll make up the hours. Go, he repeated firmly. Take care of your boy. She practically ran to her car, turning her phone back on as she started the engine. Messages flooded in. From Mrs. Henderson. Luca getting very anxious. Please advise. From Rowan. I don't know what happened, but I'm here. Whatever you need. From Rowan's father. I await your terms. And finally, from Rowan again. I love you. Both of you. Whatever's wrong, we'll figure it out together. Just let me in, love. Another small word for an impossible thing. She pulled into the school parking lot at 2:27 p.m., her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see Luca sitting in the conference room with his teacher, meticulously arranging and rearranging a set of pencils on the table, and there, in the parking space next to hers, was a familiar black car. Rowan stepped out slowly, his eyes finding hers through the windshield. He didn't approach, didn't pressure, just stood there, patient and steady, like he'd been from the start. "I got an email from your father," she said when she finally got out of her car, "and a visit from your mother." "I know." His voice was tight with barely contained anger. "I just found out. I'm so sorry. They're right, you know, about all of it. The worlds we come from, the impossibility of this, the risk to Luca." "No." He took a single step forward. "They're right about the challenges, but they're wrong about what matters." He glanced toward the conference room window. "He matters. You matter. The rest is just noise. It's not that simple." "Actually, it is." He smiled slightly. "Sometimes the most precise measurements are the simplest ones, like the distance between two hearts, the angle of a smile, the exact moment someone realizes they can't imagine their life without someone else in it." Through the window, Milena could see Luca looking up, his eyes finding them in the parking lot, his fingers stilled on the pencils. "We have exactly 2 minutes until the conference starts," Rowan said softly. "Just enough time for you to decide if you trust me. Trust us. This little family we're building, one careful measurement at a time. Family." The word echoed in her chest like a constellation finding its place in the night sky. 1 minute, 30 seconds, she whispered. "I'll wait, however long it takes." And in that moment, standing in a school parking lot while her son watched through the window and the world tried to tear them apart, Milena Carter did the bravest thing she'd ever done. She reached for Rowan's hand. Headlines weren't part of Milena's morning routine, but there it was, glaring from her phone screen as she waited for her 5:45 a.m. bus. Ellison Eyre steps down, corporate dynasty in chaos. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the article. Words jumped out like accusations. Unprecedented, family tension, mysterious personal matters, stock prices dropping. You shouldn't read those. She looked up to find Rowan beside her at the bus stop, 2 coffee cups in hand. Steam rose from them in the early morning chill. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing you coffee." He handed her a cup. "And making sure you don't spiral into guilt over things that aren't your fault. You resigned from your family's company." "I stepped back, temporarily." He leaned against the bus shelter. "Told them I needed time to evaluate my priorities. They're spinning it into a crisis because that's what they do." A week had passed since the parent-teacher conference, since she'd chosen to take his hand in that parking lot. 7 days of headlines, of whispered gossip at the clinic, of Rowan's parents escalating their attempts to resolve the situation. "Your father called the clinic yesterday," she said quietly. "Tried to get Dr. Stevens to fire me." Rowan's jaw tightened. "What happened?" "Dr. Stevens told him that harassing his employees was grounds for a lawsuit." A small smile touched her lips. "Then he gave me a raise." "Smart man." Rowan sipped his coffee. "Unlike my father, who seems determined to prove exactly why I needed to step back." The 5:45 bus appeared at the corner, right on schedule. Milena moved to board, but Rowan caught her hand. "Let me drive you. I can't start depending on rides." "What happens when—" She stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. "When what?" His voice was gentle. "When I leave, when this falls apart. Is that what you're worried about?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Luca asking about dinner schedule. Need to confirm changes." Right, dinner. Because somehow, without any formal discussion, Rowan had become a regular part of their evening routine. 3 nights a week, he'd arrive at exactly 6:15 p.m. with groceries and his well-worn briefcase full of star charts and mathematical puzzles for Luca. "I should stick to the bus," she said finally. "Keep things stable." "Okay." No argument, no pressure, just acceptance. "I'll see you at 6:15. She nodded, boarding the bus with a strange ache in her chest. Through the window, she watched him stand there, still holding his coffee, until the bus turned the corner. The clinic was unusually busy, filled with flu season casualties and insurance renewals. Milena processed paperwork mechanically, trying not to notice the way some patients whispered when they saw her, how they'd clearly connected her to the headlines. At lunch, she found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a check for an amount that made her dizzy, along with a note in elegant handwriting. Let's make this simple. Name your price. We all want what's best for Luca, don't we? Regina Ellison. Milena stared at the check until the numbers blurred. The amount would cover Luca's therapy for a year, could start a college fund, could... Everything okay? She looked up to find Dr. Stevens in the doorway, his kind face concerned. She held up the check helplessly. I don't know what to do. He sat in the chair across from her desk. Want to know what I think? Please. I think you're scared. Not of them, but of hoping, of believing you deserve something good. He smiled gently. I've watched you for 3 years, Milena, working doubles, never complaining, building a life for your son brick by brick. But lately you smile more, you stand straighter. And Luca, he's talking to other patients in the waiting room, actually talking. That's what terrifies me, she whispered. What if it all goes away? What if it doesn't? Her phone buzzed, a text from Rowan. Just had an idea for tonight's star measurement project. Think Luca might be ready to learn about parallax equations. Attached was a photo of carefully drawn diagrams, mathematical formulas broken down into simple steps. He'd clearly spent his morning preparing this, even with his company in chaos and his family in revolt. You know, Doctor, Stevens said, watching her face soften as she looked at the photo. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be happy. Another text appeared. Also, made reservations at that quiet Italian place you liked. Saturday night. Mrs. H already agreed to watch Luca. Say yes. I don't know how to do this, Milena admitted. How to trust it. Sure you do. Dr. Stevens stood, patting her shoulder. Try one careful measurement at a time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of patients and paperwork. At exactly 6:13 p.m., Milena arrived home to find Rowan already in her parking lot, leaning against his car with grocery bags at his feet. You're early, she said. Actually, I've been here since 6:05, waiting to be exactly on time. He smiled that smile that still made her heart skip. I didn't want to disrupt the schedule. Something about that, about this powerful man deliberately waiting in a parking lot to maintain her son's routine, made her reach for the envelope in her purse. Your mother left this for me. She handed him the check. Quite generous, isn't it? Rowan looked at the amount, his jaw tightening, but before he could speak, the sound of running feet interrupted them. Mom! Come on! Luca's voice carried across the parking lot as he burst out of Mrs. Henderson's apartment. It's 6:14! Time for parallax equations! They turned to find him hurrying toward them, his movements still careful, but energized with excitement. He clutched his special notebook and calculator, ready for the evening's lessons. Look what I brought, Rowan said, reaching into one of the grocery bags. Special grid paper for plotting stellar coordinates. And I thought we could make space-themed pizza while we work on the math, with precisely measured toppings, Luca asked hopefully. Is there any other way? Milena watched them head inside, Luca already launching into a detailed explanation of his latest astronomical calculations. The envelope with the check was still in her hand. Looking down at it, she suddenly knew exactly what to do. Later that night, after Luca was asleep and Rowan had gone home, Milena sat at her small kitchen table and composed an email. Dear Mrs. Ellison, thank you for your generous offer. You're right. We all want what's best for Luca. That's why I'm returning your check. You see, my son is teaching me something important. The most valuable measurements aren't the ones we make with money. They're the ones we make with our hearts. Sincerely, Milena Carter. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she opened her phone's camera roll, looking at the photos from dinner. Luca and Rowan bent over mathematical formulas, pizza abandoned as they lost themselves in calculations. Her son's face alive with joy, Rowan's eyes soft with love for them both. Some things, she was learning, couldn't be measured in dollars or social status or corporate dynasties. Some things could only be measured in moments like these, in carefully counted seconds, in the angle of a smile, in the quiet space between heartbeats where love took root and grew. Her phone lit up with one last message from Rowan. Thank you for tonight, for everything, for showing me what really matters. She looked at the empty envelope on her table, then at the message glowing on her screen, at the star charts scattered across her counter and the pizza crumbs that would need to be cleaned up before morning. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to measure or calculate or control what was happening. She just let herself feel it. All of it. Thank you, she typed back, for teaching us that love doesn't always need precise measurements. His response came instantly. but it helps when you have a good ruler and a better heart. Milena smiled, touching the words on her screen, because maybe that was the real measurement that mattered. Not the distance between their worlds, but the way their hearts had learned to beat in sync, creating a rhythm as steady and true as the stars Luca loved to count. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, delivered to Milena's clinic desk by personal courier. Gold lettering caught the fluorescent light as she opened the envelope. You are cordially invited to attend the annual Ecotech Global Charity Gala tonight at 7 p.m. the Grand Maxwell Hotel. A handwritten note was paperclipped to the corner in Rowan's distinctive script. I know it's last minute. I know it's not our usual routine, but I need you there. Both of you. Please. Milena's hands trembled. Tonight was Thursday, pizza and star charts night. Luca had been talking about it all week, excited to show Rowan his new constellation calculations. Her phone buzzed. Before you say no, I've thought it through. The hotel has a private observation deck. Luca can set up his telescope there, better view than your balcony. And the kitchen agreed to make his pizza exactly the way he likes it. Please trust me with this. Another text followed quickly. It's time to stop hiding. To show my family and the whole board exactly why I stepped down, what really matters. Everything okay? She looked up to find Dr. Stevens watching her with concern. Rowan wants us to attend the corporate gala tonight. She showed him the invitation. His father's making a big announcement, something about the future of the company. Ah, Dr. Stevens sat on the edge of her desk. And you're scared, terrified. She traced the gold lettering with one finger. Luca doesn't do well with crowds, or changes, or having his whole world shift. Yeah, he smiled gently. Like he did when Rowan first came into your lives. Sometimes the scariest changes turn out to be the best ones. Her phone lit up again. Mrs. Henderson this time. Luca's teacher called. He spoke up in class today. Actually raised his hand and explained parallax to the whole room. Attached was a photo. Luca at the whiteboard, carefully drawing the same stellar diagrams Rowan had taught him. His face held the focused excitement they were seeing more and more lately. Go, Dr. Stevens said softly. Take the afternoon off. Get ready. Face whatever's coming. But the Anderson file will be here tomorrow. He squeezed her shoulder. Some things are more important than paperwork. 2 hours later, Milena stood in her bedroom staring at her reflection. The dress had arrived shortly after the invitation, a deep blue silk that reminded her of the night sky. It fit perfectly, of course. Rowan would have made sure of that. Mom, Luca's voice drew her attention to the doorway. The angular displacement is incorrect. She turned to find him frowning at her dress. Huh? What do you mean, baby? The hem. He pointed with precise movements. It's 0.3 degrees off horizontal. The car man wouldn't like that. A laugh bubbled up in her throat. Of course, her son would notice the slightest imperfection in measurement. Should we fix it? He nodded seriously, already reaching for his ruler. They spent the next 15 minutes adjusting the hem while Luca calculated exact angles. By the time Mrs. Henderson arrived to help them get ready, the dress was mathematically perfect. Look what else came, Mrs. Henderson said, holding up a garment bag. Inside was a small suit in Luca's favorite shade of blue, with subtle silver pinstripes that caught the light like stars. The measurements are exact, Luca observed, inspecting the seams, like the carman's rulers. Yes, baby, exactly like that. A text lit up her phone. Car will be there at 6:45. Everything's ready on the observation deck. You can do this, we can do this. At exactly 6:45, a sleek black car pulled up outside, but instead of a driver, it was Rowan who stepped out, wearing a tuxedo that made Milena's breath catch. The angles of your collar are precise, Luca informed him seriously. I measured them specially. Rowan knelt to Luca's level. I have something for you. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver tie clip shaped like a constellation. It's Orion, your favorite. Luca's fingers traced the pattern with careful movements. The distances between stars are astronomically accurate. Of course they are. Rowan's voice was soft. I would never give you incorrect measurements. Something about those words, about the way he understood exactly what mattered to her son, made Milena's eyes fill with tears. Hey, he said, standing to face her. We don't have to do this. Yes, she whispered. We do. The drive to the hotel was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of Luca measuring his tie clip with a pocket ruler. Milena watched the city lights blur past, each one bringing them closer to a world she'd never thought she'd enter. There will be cameras, Rowan said finally. Reporters. My father's probably planned some kind of public statement. I know. We can still turn around. She reached for his hand. No, we can't. Because she understood now what he was really doing. This wasn't just about facing his family or the board. This was about claiming them, publicly and permanently. About drawing a line between his old life and whatever future they were building together. The hotel lobby was a sea of designer dresses and camera flashes. Milena felt Luca tense beside her as the noise and movement threatened to overwhelm him. Remember the deck, Rowan said quietly. Your telescope is already set up. We just have to get through the lobby. They moved through the crowd carefully, Rowan's hand steady on Luca's shoulder, guiding him through the chaos. Milena heard the whispers, saw the phones recording their progress. Tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves. And then, cutting through the crowd like an Arctic wind, came Regina Ellison's voice. Rowan, a word. They turned to find his parents approaching, his mother elegant in diamonds, his father's face tight with barely controlled anger. Not now, Rowan said firmly. Yes, now. Lawrence Ellison stepped forward. Before you completely destroy everything we've built, everything you were meant to be. Luca's hands began to move faster, tracking invisible patterns in the air, his first sign of distress. Milena started to reach for him, but Rowan was already there, kneeling again to meet her son's eyes. Hey, he said softly. Want to know a secret about this room? Luca's fingers stilled slightly. Look up. Rowan pointed to the grand chandelier. See how the crystals are arranged. It's the same pattern as the Pleiades cluster. 7 points of light, with exactly 60 degrees of separation. Slowly, Luca's gaze lifted to the ceiling. His breathing steadied as he began to calculate angles, finding order in the chaos. This is exactly what we mean, Regina hissed. You're the heir to a corporate empire, and you're on your knees talking about star patterns. No, Rowan said, still focused on Luca. I'm on my knees talking to my family. The word fell like a stone into silence. Around them, phones recorded every moment, every word. You don't mean that, Lawrence said quietly. You can't. Actually, Dad, I do. Rowan stood, keeping one hand gentle on Luca's shoulder. And tonight, in front of the board and all your carefully chosen witnesses, I'm going to explain exactly why. Milena watched the emotions play across his parents' faces. Shock, anger, calculation. She saw the moment they realized how many phones were recording, how public this confrontation had become. Perhaps, Regina said finally, her social mask slipping back into place, we should continue this discussion privately. No, Rowan's voice was firm. No more private discussions, no more negotiations, no more trying to buy or threaten what matters most to me. He looked at Milena, then at Luca, who was still calculating chandelier angles. Yeah, this is my family now, my future, my choice. Lawrence stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. If you do this, if you throw away everything we've built, don't expect to ever come back. I'm not throwing anything away. Rowan smiled slightly. I'm building something better, something real. He squeezed Luca's shoulder gently. Ready to see your telescope, buddy? Luca nodded, his calculations complete. The chandelier is 0.02 degrees off center. We'll send them a strongly worded letter about their measurements, Rowan promised, making Milena's heart squeeze with love for them both. As they walked away, leaving his parents surrounded by whispers and camera phones, Rowan reached for Milena's hand. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me with this, with everything. She interlaced their fingers, feeling the steady strength of him. Thank you for making it worth the risk. Above them, the chandelier's crystals caught the light, scattering it like stars across the marble floor. Milena watched her son's face as he tracked each point of light, finding patterns in their dance. Watched Rowan watching him, love evident in every careful movement, and she realized that some measurements couldn't be calculated with rulers or protractors. Some things could only be measured in the space between heartbeats, in the quiet moments between chaos, in the brave choices that changed everything. Tonight, surrounded by cameras and whispers and judgment, they would face whatever came next, together, as a family. But first, they had stars to count. 1 month after the gala, Milena stood in her small kitchen, surrounded by moving boxes and measuring tape. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching the diamond ring she still wasn't used to wearing. Simple, elegant, with tiny stars engraved inside the band. Mom? Luca's voice drifted from his bedroom. These measurements are incorrect. She found him frowning at a stack of boxes, ruler in hand. What's wrong, baby? The volume calculations don't account for book weight distribution. We need to recalibrate. I think you're right. Rowan appeared in the doorway, his usually pristine clothes dusty from packing. Want to help me work out the correct formula? Luca nodded seriously, already reaching for his notebook. 1 month hadn't changed his need for precision, but it had changed how he handled disruptions. Now, instead of panicking when measurements were wrong, he solved the problem methodically. Together, Milena watched them bend over the calculations, Rowan patient and focused, as Luca explained his theories about mass distribution. The sight still made her heart squeeze. This powerful CEO, who'd walked away from his empire to sit on bedroom floors and measure moving boxes. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Stevens. Everything okay with the move? Need any help? We're good, she typed back. Luca's supervising the box measurements. Of course he is. Oh, and the board position paperwork came through. Congratulations, Director of Patient Services. She smiled, remembering his face when he'd offered her the promotion. We need someone who understands both healthcare and special needs families, he'd said. Someone who can help us serve patients like Luca better. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her look up. Mrs. Henderson appeared, carrying a casserole dish. Thought you could use lunch. How's the packing going? Ask the geometry team, Milena laughed, gesturing to where Rowan and Luca were now measuring box corners with digital protractors. Still can't believe you're leaving me. Mrs. Henderson's eyes misted slightly. Who's going to bring me late-night coffee and tell me about constellations? We're only moving 10 minutes away, Milena reminded her, and you're still our official backup childcare, unless you're too busy with that new grandbaby coming. Never too busy for my favorite boys. She set down the casserole, though I suppose they have each other now. They did. The thought still amazed Milena, how naturally Rowan had fit himself into their lives, how completely he'd embraced their routines and requirements. He'd found a house that perfectly balanced everyone's needs, close enough to keep Luca's school and therapy schedule, with a dedicated observatory room and a kitchen designed for their Thursday pizza-making traditions. Mom, Luca appeared beside her, clutching his notebook. We solved the volume distribution equation, but we need more boxes. Exactly 3 more, with reinforced corners. Already got them. Rowan held up his phone. They'll be here in 27 minutes. I ordered the same brand as the others, same dimensions. Luca's shoulders relaxed at this confirmation of consistency. Good. Then we can maintain optimal stack alignment. Speaking of alignment, Rowan said carefully, I was thinking about dinner tonight, since it's Thursday. Pizza night, Luca finished. But the kitchen is packed, true. But remember that Italian restaurant, the quiet one with the precise measurements. Milena held her breath. They hadn't been back to Marco's since their first date, hadn't tested Luca with that kind of change. The one with the living wall, Luca asked, where the owner's son likes patterns. That's right, Marco asked about you. Said his son wants to show you their new geometric herb garden. Luca considered this, fingers moving in familiar patterns. What time? 6:15, Rowan said. Same as always. And we can measure the herb patterns. Brought my special ruler just for that. Milena watched the conversation with tears threatening. A year ago, this kind of deviation from routine would have been impossible, but Rowan had taught them both that some changes could be beautiful, if measured carefully enough. Okay, Luca decided, but we need to finish the box calculations first. Deal. Rowan's smile was gentle. So I want to help me measure the moving truck capacity while your mum takes a break. Milena started to protest, but Mrs. Henderson touched her arm. Let them handle it. Come have tea with me. One last time in my kitchen. An hour later, sitting in Mrs. Henderson's familiar apartment, Milena watched through the window as Rowan and Luca calculated truck dimensions. Her son's movements were excited, engaged, as he explained something about cubic feet and load distribution. Yes, you know, Mrs. Henderson said softly, I used to worry about you two, a single mum working herself to exhaustion, a special little boy who needed so much. But now, she smiled, now I just see a family, complete. I was so scared, Milena admitted, of letting someone in, of disrupting Luca's world, of hoping. And now, before she could answer, a commotion outside drew their attention. A sleek black car had pulled into the parking lot, one Milena recognized. Regina Ellison stepped out, looking as elegant as ever, but something was different about her posture, less rigid somehow. She carried a large package wrapped in silver paper. Through the window, Milena watched Rowan step protectively in front of Luca, but Regina held up her hands in a gesture of peace. "I should go down," Milena said, standing. "Want backup?" "No. We need to handle this ourselves." By the time she reached the parking lot, Regina was speaking softly to Rowan while Luca continued his measurements, carefully ignoring the disruption. "Understand if you don't want it," Regina was saying, "but when I saw it, I thought of him." She held out the package. Rowan took it warily, then called, "Hey, buddy, want to help me measure something?" Luca looked up, assessed the situation, then approached with his ruler ready. Together, they carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a professional-grade telescope, smaller than Rowan's, but with incredibly precise digital controls. "It's calibrated to 0.001 degree accuracy," Regina said quietly. I did some research about astronomy and autism and family." Luca was already examining the telescope's mechanisms, his fingers moving over the controls with familiar precision. "Just the declination adjustment is exact," he announced, "like Carman's rulers. I'm not asking for forgiveness," Regina said, watching him, "or even acceptance. I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand." Milena saw the emotion cross Rowan's face, hope warring with caution, love battling hurt. Before he could respond, Luca spoke again. "The angle is wrong." They all turned to him. "What angle, baby?" Milena asked, her shoulders too tense. "Like the chandelier that night, 0.02 degrees off." A startled laugh escaped Regina, perhaps her first real laugh in years. "He's right. I am tense, scared, actually, of making more mistakes, of losing my son completely." "Mom," Rowan's voice was soft. "No, let me finish. I've spent my life measuring success in dollars and social status, but watching you these past months, the way you love them, the way you've built something real." She straightened her shoulders, correcting the angle Luca had noted. "I'd like to learn your kind of measurements, if you'll teach me." Milena held her breath, watching Rowan struggle with the weight of history and hope. But it was Luca who answered. "We have pizza tonight, at the restaurant with the herb garden. 6:15. He didn't look up from the telescope. The measurements there are usually accurate." The invitation, delivered in his precise, matter-of-fact way, brought tears to Regina's eyes. I would like that, very much. But no diamonds," he added firmly. "They refract light, disrupt astronomical observations." This time, Regina's laugh was real and warm. "I promise. No diamonds." She turned to Milena. "And no more interference, no more judgment, just a chance to learn. To be part of this, however you'll let me." Milena looked at Rowan, letting him make this choice. He nodded slowly. 6:15, he said. "Don't be late." Luca takes his scheduling very seriously. "I'm learning that accuracy matters," Regina said softly, "in all the important things." After she left, they stood in the parking lot, surrounded by moving boxes and new telescopes and the weight of moments that changed everything. "You okay?" Milena asked Rowan. He pulled her close, watching Luca adjust the telescope's settings. "Yeah, I think I am. We all are, because that's what family meant." She was learning. Not perfect measurements or flawless angles, but the willingness to keep trying, to adjust and recalculate and make space for love in all its imperfect forms. "Mum," Luca called, "the moving truck's volume coefficients need revision." "Coming, baby." She squeezed Rowan's hand. "Far ready to do some measuring." His smile was as bright as the stars they'd learned to count together, always. And so, surrounded by boxes and calculations and the endless possibilities of love, they began again, together, measuring each moment, each joy, each challenge with the tools they'd built as a family, one careful angle at a time. Epilogue: The Geometry of Love. 1 year later. The observatory room's dome opened silently to the summer night sky, revealing a canvas of stars that seemed close enough to touch. Luca stood at his telescope, the one Regina had given him, now upgraded with even more precise digital controls, carefully adjusting the coordinates. 0.003 degrees west, he announced. "The alignment is optimal. Perfect timing." Rowan entered with 3 hot chocolates on a tray, each mug measured to exactly the same level. "Your mum's on her way up. You ready to show her?" Luca nodded, double-checking his calculations in the notebook that now contained a year's worth of astronomical observations. His hands moved with confidence as he made final adjustments, no longer needing anyone to verify his measurements. Footsteps on the stairs announced Milena's arrival. She'd changed out of her clinic director's suit into comfortable clothes, her engagement ring catching starlight as she accepted her hot chocolate. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "Board meeting ran over." "You're not late," Luca corrected without looking up from his telescope. "Asked 9.7 minutes until optimal viewing angle. He's been tracking the convergence for weeks," Rowan explained, sliding an arm around her waist. "Wouldn't even tell me what he's found." They waited in comfortable silence while Luca completed his preparations. Through the observatory's windows, they could see the lights of their neighborhood, the garden where they still made Thursday night pizzas, the path to Mrs. Henderson's new house just 2 streets over. "They're ready," Luca announced finally. "Mom first." Milena approached the telescope, following his precise instructions for eye position and focus. Through the lens, she saw a cluster of stars arranged in an unfamiliar pattern. "What am I looking at, baby?" "A new constellation." His voice held the excitement that now came more frequently, more naturally. "I discovered it 3 weeks ago. Been calculating its position every night." "He's been very secretive about it," Rowan added. "Wouldn't even let his grandmother help with the measurements when she visited yesterday." The mention of Regina brought a smile to Milena's face. The weekly dinners with Rowan's mother had become surprisingly pleasant, filled with stories and star charts, and Regina's earnest attempts to understand their world. "Look at the star pattern," Luca directed. "What do you see?" Milena adjusted the focus slightly. The stars seemed to form a shape. "Is that a heart?" Luca confirmed. "But not a standard symmetrical heart. This one's real, imperfect. Like the car man says, love should be." Tears filled Milena's eyes as she straightened. "Oh, baby." "The angles aren't standard," he continued, his fingers moving in excited patterns. "They vary by 0.004 degrees from traditional heart iconography, but that makes them better, more accurate to actual emotional geometry." "Emotional geometry?" Rowan's voice was soft with wonder. "Yes, like us." Luca made a minor adjustment to the telescope's position. "Not perfect angles, but perfect anyway." Milena watched as her son showed Rowan the constellation, explaining the mathematical principles behind its discovery. Her brilliant, beautiful boy, who once struggled to speak, now gave detailed lectures about stellar cartography. Who once feared any deviation from routine, now helped design new family traditions. She thought of all the measurements that had brought them here, the precise angles of morning routines, the careful calculations of change and growth, the infinite variables of learning to love and trust and hope. "I submitted it for official registration," Luca announced. "To the International Astronomical Union." "You did?" Rowan's voice cracked slightly. "When?" "Last week. Grandmother helped with the paperwork." He shuffled through his notebook. "I named it." "What did you name it, baby?" Milena asked softly. "Familia Mensura." He pronounced the Latin carefully. "It means family of measurements," Rowan translated, his eyes shining. "Yes." Luca turned back to his telescope. "Because that's what we are. Different angles, different calculations, but making patterns together." Milena felt Rowan's arms slide around her as they watched their son map his stars. Through the dome's opening, the night sky stretched endless and beautiful, full of new constellations waiting to be discovered. 0.004 degrees, she whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace. The variance he mentioned, in the heart's angles." She smiled. "It turns out love doesn't need perfect measurements after all." "No," Rowan agreed softly, watching Luca add another precise note to his calculations. "But it helps to have someone who knows how to measure what matters." Above them, the stars of Familia Mensura glittered like diamonds in the velvet sky, a testament to the geometry of their love, the mathematics of their family, the precise calculations that had brought them all home, not to the perfect life they'd once imagined, to the beautifully imperfect one they'd built together, measured in love, infinite degrees of joy. Your opinion matters. What did you learn from this story? Have you ever had to measure love in unexpected ways? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.